Okay, I think we've got it. I think we've got it. I think we've got it. I. Here we go. Yep, it worked. It worked. It worked. Awesome. Amazing. We're now 12 minutes into this stream. And I finally got the microphone. Oh my god, if there was ever just like a more shining example of how 2021's going, it's like trying to maintain your composure in the middle of a live stream when your tech is failing you. Ah, there we go. Great to see so many people in the chat. Great to see so many people here already listening to me as I'm... Well, you weren't listening to me. You could just see me flailing around trying to figure out how this worked. But yeah, that did it. Thank you all so much. Welcome. We made it to this live stream. Artist Game Dev, totally forgot I had this on, and the whoa made me jump out of my seat. There's the clip for the day. Someone needs to clip that of just me like losing my collective whatever composure I have left as I managed to get it going. So yes, good evening everyone. Welcome. I mean, to be fair, it was probably good that I panic ate, stress ate all my pretzels right at the start. So yeah, some brighter spark. Sad we didn't get the pretzel munching ASMR. Like, I was going to say that's a patron only thing, but even then, no. Keith says, yeah, come on, Tommy, we've been doing nothing but video calls for 2 years now. God. You know, I even did, I did an invited talk recently and I was muted at the start of it and everything. Like, this was a very particular bug that's hidden deep within my streaming setup. And so, every time I start a stream, I get it wrong. To this day. And I haven't done I haven't done a live stream since I played a bit of Back 4 Blood with some friends. So yeah, took a little while, but we got there. We got there. And so look at that. I even managed to get the chat on the stream too, which was great. So I'm really pleased with that. But yes, hello, welcome. We made it. This is the end of year review and Q&A. So thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you're all doing well wherever you are. It has been a year, hasn't it? It's been a day, it's been a week, it's been a month, it's been a year. And so yeah, I figured I did one of these last year where I kind of talked a lot about what I did and the stuff that I'd put out and the year of YouTube as it was for me. And then also did a Q&A. And so I thought, you know what, I should just get in the habit of doing this regularly, sort of a post-mortem of the year, talk a little bit about what I did, and then also just engage with yourself a little bit. So I've got a bunch of questions already lined up. I've already actually prepped answers for most of them. A whole bunch from patrons, and then also a few from folk out there on YouTube as well. But yeah, I'm super happy to see everybody here. I hope you're all doing good. And that your winter plans, whatever they are not going to be too drastically affected by what's going on. Noel McManus, Scottish and all, Merry Christmas to you. In fact, you know what, let's get very Christmassy, because this is the last big can of brew that I had left lying around. So we're gonna get into this. Where's my sponsorship deal? I am brew. Oh, that's good. That was good. But yes, I've also got a couple of beers. Mostly because I was drinking beer before the stream. I had a beer. That isn't to explain the failure of the streaming setup. That's just I was having a beer over dinner with my wife, and then I realized, oh no, if I've done that, because usually if you watch a lot of my streams, I tend to drink a lot of whiskey off camera, and I realized I can't do that because if I've been drinking beer, I can't mix. I'm one of those people that I can just drink. I can quite happily drink whiskey the whole day. I can quite happily not, drink straight a beer or whatever. Not a problem. Well, maybe the following day might be a problem. But I can't mix. If I mix like wine, for example, with beer or any other thing, I just completely collapse. Dave Thomas, here's a dram to you, sir. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas. Keith, Alan says, your winter plan is to survive. Keith says, my winter plans were indeed affected, but that's the problem with living abroad. Replacement plans have been made. I hope you're all going to get to spend some time with someone close to you, someone who's a friend or family or whatever. Yeah, we were originally planning on going to Scotland. That is not happening now. My wife has been a little poorly. She's okay. no COVID either. We've been testing quite thoroughly here, but my wife was a bit poorly. I was then concerned that I'd got it as well. And then we just went through the boosters here. We've just had our COVID boosters. So well, I was knocked on my ass, actually. I don't know about anyone else's experience. I know a few of my friends have had a similar experience. We were all double Pfizer boosted, and then we had a double Pfizer vaccinated, and then we had a Moderna booster, and all of us had exactly the same reaction to it in like the first day. All good, not a problem. I am boosted, 5G activate. The following day, just completely bedridden. Absolute mess. And so yeah, I got boosted at the end of last week, and then the following day I spent most of it in my bed, and then crawled out my bed to go and play Earth Defense Force and release the video about Earth Defense Force. And then by Monday I felt absolutely fine. So, but yeah, just so many things happening at once. We were then just like, you know what, and the restrictions on how many family members you can see and stuff like that, particularly in Scotland, is quite tight. We have a lot of family that we have to go up and see whenever we go up. My wife is also Scottish, so we're always kind of doing a tour. And so then what usually happens is that we don't just see my immediate family, we see my wife's family, and then that's a lot of different people mixing. And so we're really cautious of that. So yeah, what we'll do is I've already got the review part ready to go, so we can go and do that. It's actually slides. I prepared slides for this, which is the most ridiculously anal lecture-y thing I could possibly do, but I actually prepared slides for this. But yeah, let's just quickly check the chat. Let's see. Mads Jada, I am Brute, and of course I am Brute. I mean, what else are we going to do? It gets you through, as they say in the advertising. Let's see. Ezra got boosted today, and I'm seemingly okay, hopefully. Yeah, so that was the thing that we had, was the first day I was okay. The second day, I wasn't so good. And so we're very mindful of that, actually, because my wife is getting boosted tomorrow. So I'm preparing to help out with that and make sure that she's going to be okay. Let's see. Cedar Valley Gaming said my booster kicked my butt. Only time I ran a fever with all 3 shots. Yeah, certainly when I did my first 2 shots, I was okay. And I think it was the mix of the cocktail, but besides that, like I say, after that, I'm pretty good this week. I feel like I'm getting back into my rhythm. Got a whole bunch of other problems to deal with, but you know, it is what it is. Let's see, Mads, have you looked at the Rockstar Games Take-Two AI patents? I have not. David Thomas says, slides, are we PowerPointing? We are PowerPointing. Look at this magnificent beast. I went away and prepared slides just for you. And so yeah, let's get into this. Let's do this now. Because I feel like then, because as the questions are warming up, I want to make sure that I'm catching all the questions just in case. Because there's a whole bunch of questions in the slides. But actually, Keith already says, I suppose my questions for the QA section are, did you enjoy running a game jam, and are you planning on making it a regular thing? We will come back to that, because that was a question that was raised as part of the Q&A. So let's do this. So yeah, let's talk about videos. I made a bunch of videos this year. Interestingly, like looking back on it, this is the least number of videos I've ever made. Well, not I've ever made, but certainly for a long time. It's been a long time, and when you really stack up the number of videos I released, I've actually got a slide dedicated to this, of like how many videos I've released on a given year, because interestingly, I think one of the key things to point out is actually this has been one of the poorest years the channel's had in quite a while. That isn't to say that I'm done or I'm, you know, feeling bad about it. I'm not. I'm actually, this has been an interesting year in trying to reconcile a little bit of that for me, because I'm also really proud of some of the stuff we did. So let's go back. These are the main episodes of AI in Games that came out this year, starting with episode 57 on Cyclic Dungeon Generation and Unexplored, which was great. You know, niche little indie title, which is actually right now, Unexplored 2 is now available in early access over on the Epic Games Store. I got to work a little bit with one of the game's developers, Joris Dormans, on that video. I'm really pleased with it. I was really proud of that video, and I thought it turned out really well. I think one of the things that, excuse me, I didn't really get to cover many academic projects this year, but one of the things I am super proud of is that we did episode 58, which was Procedural Culture Generation, and that was on Ultima Ratio Regum. It also, I think, currently is the record for the longest episode of AI in games. I think it's maybe in contention with the Watch Dogs Legion episode, but in terms of the actual main episodes of AI in games, I'm pretty sure this is the longest one. And this was a great one because this was actually a video that I remember. So one of the things to kind of talk about is Mark Johnson, Dr. Mark Johnson, who is the creator of Unexplored, is actually someone I've known for quite a few years now. And we've always kind of kept in touch. We've not really seen each other in person in a long time, not just because of COVID and everything, but our careers went in different directions. And he's currently working as a university lecturer down in Australia. And I've always been really impressed and really admired the work that he's done on Ultima Ratio Regum. And one of the things was that, like, we had this desire from the Patreon community to actually make an episode about it. And then I reached out to Mark because I said, like, hey, like, the patrons have asked for an episode on Ultima Ratio Regum, and I did kind of mention that to them. I actually kind of know the guy. Then the thing is that Mark has been a big fan of the channel for many years. He's always really been supportive of the work that I do, and so he was really, really humbled. But it was also interesting because we were at this key moment in the development of that game. If you've watched that episode, as we talk about, Mark went through a bit of a maybe not necessarily a dark phase, but certainly a phase in which his enthusiasm and passion for working on the game had diminished because he'd been working on it for 10 years and a lot of things changed during that period of your life. And we talk about this a lot in the video, and I'm really grateful to him because we got into some really, really personal territory, which I thought it would actually elevate the video more that we got to talk about this. And I wasn't sort of saying, hey, look, I want you to expose yourself emotionally for views, but rather I felt that it was really important that in order to tell the story of 10 years of Ultima Ratio Regum, we had to also deal with the lows that go with the highs. And almost all of the, like, in the actual interview, I think only maybe one thing got omitted, and that was a specific thing that Mark asked that we don't put that on the record, and that was totally fine. But as you heard in the episode, he talked about being quite depressed. He talked about burnout. He talked about losing his enthusiasm and excitement for that game. And one of the great things was that he was bouncing back from that at the time that I reached out to him, and he's continuing to work on it. If anyone follows Mark over on Twitter, he's still producing stuff. I saw him posting at the weekend, like, for a new update that he's working on for Ultima Ratio Regum, and that is awesome. I am always really excited to see where it goes. And it's funny because it's not a game that I personally am passionate about playing, but it's a game that I find really fascinating just to explore and wander around in. But yeah, really happy with that. Definitely one of the most niche topics we've ever covered. And I spoke to Mark afterwards, and he was really pleased that we'd done that video and we got it out there. And for him, like, that was quite awesome for him, and that meant it was quite awesome for me. So yeah. We also had, let me see, episode 59, which was Gears Tactics. Gears Tactics, oh, poor Gears Tactics. Gears Tactics is my favourite episode I made this year. Favourite episode of the main AI in Games videos. I really love Gears Tactics. It was one of my favourite games that I played during lockdown, and that video just came together really quickly. Like, I knew what that video needed to be as soon as I started putting, I was going to say pen to paper, but I started typing out the script, and I thought, oh, this is good. I know what I want to do. I had a punchy intro for it and everything, and I really loved it. I'm really pleased with that video. I think it's really great. Very few people watched it. In fact, looking at all of these episodes, these case studies, as I call them, of AI in games, it is the least watched episode of the year. It's actually, I think, one of my least watched videos that I released this year. And it's a shame. It's actually the one that I enjoy the most. So yeah, go check it out if you haven't seen it. Episode 60, of course, was the episode on Drivatar, where we look at the inner workings of Forza. This has been a lot of work because this has actually been an episode I've been slowly chipping away at for about 4 years. Just little bits of research here and there. I've talked about this before, that I have a document system put aside for all the notes that I take in preparation for an episode, there is so many straggly bits of information I had on Forza. And interestingly, I was in the middle of preparing this as like one of those episodes I was going to get around to making, and then the Ars Technica War Stories video broke on Forza, and I got super annoyed because I thought I could have done that before they did. There was actually, to their credit, there's a whole bunch of stuff in that episode that I didn't know, but there's a bunch of stuff that I knew that isn't in that video. And so my video ended up becoming this weird hybrid of both some of the stuff in that video as well as the stuff that I had researched over the years. The thing is, I didn't know 100% how Drivatar works, but I've got a very, very, very good idea of significant portions of it. So it was really great to be able to talk about that. And it's the most watched video that I've released this year. It's not my most watched video of the year, we'll talk about that in a bit, but it was the most watched episode that I've released this year. I think it's had about 125,000 views. Let's see, then I did the 6162 double bill, which was texture upscaling and DLSS. Now that was actually a Patreon request, and originally it was just about texture upscaling. And one of the interesting things was I was writing up the texture upscaling part of the video, and particularly really leaning into like all the cool stuff on hobbyists are using generative adversarial networks. And then I was already working on this as an interesting, because I originally just focused it on texture upscaling and texture synthesis. And synthesis is the idea where if you've drawn a texture on a certain size of canvas, if you were to make the canvas bigger, could you train an AI that figures out how to draw it in to fill the rest of the canvas? And, excuse me, I kind of focused on upscaling. I thought the upscaling was the more interesting story, particularly around the hobby communities that were making mods for games. And then, lo and behold, the Mass Effect Legendary Edition came along, which was using this upscaling technology for Mass Effect. And I thought, right, now is the time to do this video. And interestingly, like while I was researching it, and while I was writing it rather, I got really interested in trying to explain that this is a pre-render step of development, that you're trying to point out this is something that's done during in the assets of the game before the game is launched. It's all put into the textures. We upscale all the textures, we replace all the textures, and then it ended up, the thing was, I was chatting with someone else about this outside of here, and they were like, oh, it's like DLSS. And I said, no, it's not like DLSS, because DLSS is something that runs at runtime on the graphics card. And so I figured out, actually, the trick here is I should maybe just write 2 episodes that differentiate between the 2 of them. And so that's how the DLSS episode emerged, was because originally the texture upscaling episode had a whole huge chunk of it explaining that it wasn't DLSS and what DLSS was. So actually, that's a video in and of itself. So I ripped it out and then wrote the 2 of them together. And then, of course, I launched the 2 of them within days of each other. Ezra says, ended up using the DLSS vid to help for work. Awesome. Great. That's actually the goal. Mission accomplished. And I've only done 1 other episode since, and that was most recently episode 63 on Red Dead Redemption 2 and horses. That was one of the talks that came out of GDC this year, and Tobias Kleinthaus came and gave that talk. Originally, it was meant to be a previous GDC, but then, of course, GDC got cancelled and everything else. And so I'm on the advisory board, of course, for the AI Summit. And so we saw that this talk had came in, and I just thought it was a really interesting talk. It was this weird mishmash of AI behavior and animation problems, and so many animation problems. And I thought, this is great. I just need to find a way to make this into an interesting video. And that took a bit of work. That episode probably got rewritten 3 or 4 times because I just couldn't figure out. One of the things I'm always worried about, particularly when I make a video based on a dev talk, is I don't just make a dumbed down version of the dev talk. I want to make sure that I'm bringing extra contextual knowledge in there. And so that episode ended up getting rewritten a couple of times as a result of this, because I felt like I was taking too much for granted and that it was flowing exactly like Tobias's original talk, and I didn't want it to do that because I want it to complement his talk so that if you're interested, you can go and seek it out. Let's see, where did my mouse go? I like how now that I actually show the chat from my own chat window here, my my attempts to moderate appear on screen. The deep dive into horse genitalia. Good times. You didn't use that for work. That's disappointing. All right. So yeah, next up was Design Dive. I forgot to put cross dissolves on my slide transitions. Oh god, I'm a total slacker. Yeah, so Design Dive came back a little bit this year. Like Design Dive had kind of fell by the wayside over the last couple of years. And particularly last year, I actually moved away from doing Design Dive and just leaned really heavily into doing the main episodes of AI in games. And so if you actually recall last year, almost all of what I did was the main AI in games series. There was 2 Design Dive episodes, Alpha Star and Doom 64. And then I also did 1 AI 101 episode on goal-oriented action. Oh no, I did 2. I did goal-oriented action planning to celebrate the 100,000 subscribers milestone. And then I also did an episode on directors. So this year I wanted to try and get back into that a little bit. And the thing that triggered it was Cyberpunk 2077, which then led to the Video Game Discourse is Broken video. That is one of my most viewed episodes that I made this year. That has also been an episode that has got me a lot of attention. Well, I wound up on the Kotaku in Action subreddit for the first time, so guess I'm doing something right. And yeah, I had a right good gripe about a lot of things in that video, but it was an opportunity for me to really take a lot of frustration I've had for a very long time about the things that I do here on the YouTube channel, and then try and contextualize it in a way that I felt that maybe the audience could connect to. And I think I did that to some extent, but also that has definitely been the most heated the comment section on this channel has ever been. Let's see. Then I did the Lockdown in Gaming episode just because I thought, oh, you know what would be really fun is just thinking about all the games that I played over the last year and which games I use as a mechanism to, make myself feel better. And particularly also, it was actually written to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Mario Kart community that I'm still a part of, that we still play twice a week when we can. Tuesdays and Thursdays we always get together, and if you can make it, you make it. I've actually not been able to make it the last couple of weeks, but I turned up yesterday, and I'm hoping to turn up tomorrow. Oh no, wait, I don't think I can turn up tomorrow actually. Damn it! But yeah, and that was an episode I thought was quite fun. It was also really good to listen to yourselves and find out what games you've been playing. Like actually reading the comments was really fun, and it also was a mechanism for me to go and actually find some other games to go and check out. Thrill of the Hunt, which was actually a follow-up to that episode because I realised one of the games that I got really into this year was Monster Hunter. And Monster Hunter Rise, in fact, is my most played game on my Switch this year, according to my end-of-year Switch breakdown, if I remember right. And between that and Monster Hunter World, which I've played quite a bit on PC, and I started playing it again on Xbox because my brother wanted to get into it, I really wanted to just kind of contextualise what I think is really awesome about Monster Hunter. And so I made that video, and I really wanted to get into this notion of writing video essays again about really great games and what the AI is doing in those games that's really interesting. And funnily enough, around that time, I'd also been replaying a lot of the Resident Evil games, and I just finished, I think around the time I was playing Monster Hunter, or working on the Monster Hunter video, I just finished playing Resident Evil 6 and started playing the Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 7. And so this led to the Revisiting Evil series, which I think Revisiting Evil, the first part, is the second most watched Design Dive episode this year. And I'm really pleased with that. That actually got quite a nice response, and it was very, I don't know, I still feel like a bit of a crook whenever I start doing video game design essays, because I don't see myself as a designer, even though, as we'll talk about in a couple of slides, I'm actually doing a lot of design work these days. And so it was nice to do that, and I'm continuing on with that. Revisiting Evil is currently spec'd as a 4-part series. I'm working on the second part now, and more long may it continue. And I think also if those videos go down well, I'd like to do it with other franchises. So Thrill of the Hunt was really actually sort of the precursor to Revisiting Evil, because I did this video which was sort of Monster Hunters of old briefly discussed, followed by Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise, and then here I'm like, okay, we're going to do key phases of Resident Evil, and I'm really tempted to do something like Dead Space or the Gears of War franchise or Halo, as well somewhere down the line. Speaking of burning through games, the last episode, of course, of Design Dive just went live last week. And patrons have known about this one for a little while. In fact, some of the internet has known about this one for a little while because I was threatening to do it for so long. And yeah, this was Rami Ismail and I sat down to do a kind of talking heads episode on Earth Defense Force, which is a franchise that the two of us really love. So here's a fun anecdote about this. So I have met Rami a whole bunch of I don't know. I've not met Rami in person that many times. I think maybe 4 or 5 times or something like that. And the notion that Rami likes Earth Defense Force has never came up in person. We actually have Rami and I have a couple of mutual friends, and one of our mutual friends said to me in a conversation one time, because we were talking about Earth Defense Force, and he's like, "Oh man, you're the only person I know that loves Earth Defense Force as much as Rami does." I'm like, "Rami likes it?" He's like, "Oh, Rami loves Earth Defense Force," and then recounts a few stories of going round to Rami's house and then being told off because he'd never played Earth Defense Force. So shout out to Andrew Roper, who he was then like, "You should totally." I was like, maybe I should go and chat to Rami, and he's like, "Oh, I think he would do it." So we talked about doing this in person in London. And I remember briefly discussing this, and I think we had a very brief exchange online, Twitter or like in DMs or something, about maybe doing this. And we were like, yeah, this could be fun. We were thinking of booking a venue somewhere in London that the two of us could just sit down, we'd record the whole thing. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and it completely fell off my radar because other things had cropped up. And trying to survive was one of them. And yeah, like months later, I can't remember what happened, but then the notion of we should do an Earth Defense Force stream cropped up. And I think I jokingly tweeted about it. And I says, I bet you people would want to see this. And a whole bunch of people I know were like, oh my God, that sounds great. Rami's like, yeah, we should do it. And then 3 months later, we finally sat down and did the interview. And it was great. We chatted, I think the actual, we were on call for about 90 minutes, and it was so much fun. It was right at the end of my day, I think. Rami had one other work appointment, but it was awesome. We just laughed all the way through it. And I think that energy and that enthusiasm is spotted in the video itself. Question there, but I'll get to it in a second. The only other 2 videos of note that came out this year was the AI 101 on utility AI, which was, I think that was also patron voted, if I remember right. And that was one that I've been threatening to do for a very long time, because utility AI is not very well known, but it's a very difficult, well, not difficult, but sometimes it's a subject matter that not everyone immediately connects with. And so I wanted to do that justice. And let's see. Of course, we had the AI and Games Jam ran this year, our first ever Games Jam, which was amazing that people actually did it. That was the cool thing. And yeah, so we did the favorite games from the jam as well, which I don't think that had a huge number of views, but I'm really happy with it because we got to highlight some of the cool stuff people did. And there were so many really cool games were submitted from the jam. I really can't complain. Okay, so Ian, any news on generative design and Minecraft competition challenges for 2022? So I need to kind of check back in with them. I sadly didn't get to judge this year. I had too many things on. I'm usually on the judging panel for the GDMC, and I had to step down because I was simply overwhelmed with work around the judging period in July. And this is going to be a talking point in a minute. But yeah, I'm keen to. I haven't spoken with Christoph Salga in a little while. But I should definitely reach out to him. I think it'd be keen. There's a general point that I didn't do that many videos on academic research, and that is a little bone of contention I have with myself that I need to lean back into that again. And there's a couple of talking points that I do want to go and visit. There's already, I think, 2 or 3 videos that would be really, I think, would be fun to do. And so I think maybe returning to GDMC would be great because there's been a lot more engagement, more people are submitting, the quality of the work is really improving. I've also actually had project students at the university I work at doing Minecraft GDMC stuff as well, which was really fun. Let's see, Alan says, I'm using utility-based AI to play Tetris. Oh, of course you are. Oh, I envy you and your. I was going to say your free time, but I know you don't have any free time, Alan. Let's see. Joshua, any thoughts on the future of gaming overall with the newest UE5 Matrix experience demo? Do you think the next round of new AAA games will be able to do things existing games can't, especially the AI? I have not had a chance to try that Matrix demo yet. I've been hearing great things, and a lot of it, particularly about the entity kind of component system they're using, which is allowing for larger numbers of NPCs to run smoothly. I need to check that out. I think that'd be really, really exciting. Funnily enough, I've spent more time this year thinking a lot about how AI is being used outside of NPCs and in other areas of game production, which I'll actually talk about in a slide or two from now. Um, Alan, I'm literally working right now. Can't stop, won't stop. There you go. So here's some numbers because I thought, yeah, you'll want to see some numbers. Here you go. So, like I said, like actually this year has been the poorest this year the channel has performed, I think, excuse me, since 2017. That's 4 years ago. 2017 is also the year that the first Alien video blew up. And so I think a lot of this, it comes down to a number of things. And also, actually, below, from left to right, and then one row down, that is the top 10 most viewed episodes this year. And it's a interesting thing to observe. Perhaps in a moment that doesn't surprise you at all, the number 2 most watched videos were Alien. I continue to be that YouTube channel that everyone knows because I did a video once about Alien Isolation. The original Alien video, I think, is now something like 1.3 million views or something. And the revisit episode 50 is now somewhere around 750,000. I think it's over 750,000 views now or something. Meanwhile, the third most viewed video this year was Forza, which had 125,000 views. Now, one of the interesting things, and you can see this with the other years, is that when I have a big video, what often happens is it makes people watch other videos. And also, if you're hitting a more regular cadence of videos, I think you stay in the parlance a little more, like people are actually paying attention. And I think, yeah, this year has been an interesting year because if you look at the bottom row, actually, good key point here is Revisiting Evil. Revisiting Evil's only had 25,000 views. Everything on that bottom row has had less than 25,000 views, which when we compare that to last year, where almost every episode I made easily crossed 20,000 views. So it's been a bit of a low year. It's been a bit of a slow year. So, and also you can see that with the subs as well. And so what happens, I think, is, and I think this is an interesting thing to really think about, is when you're blowing up, you've got to kind of keep people engaged. And so now the channel has over 160,000 subs. But the interesting thing is whether you're going to get them to stick around and whether they're going to continue to be interested. And so one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is what are the videos that everyone's going to watch versus what are the videos that not everyone's going to, what is actually the thing that happens that, like, what's the lower bound to me? That's been the thing I've been interested in figuring out this year. What's the lower bound? If I release a video, how many people are going to watch it? Like at minimum. And the answer is, I would say, less than 10% of the actual total number of subscribers I've got. Because some of the episodes this year have had, I think, like Gears Tactics is now about 15,000 before the end of the year. The recent EDF one will not hit 10,000 before the end of the year. So it's one of those things where there's a whole bunch of you are coming in and watching every episode. But I would say there's a larger space of the subscribers who still subscribe and they go, okay, cool, not my thing. But then they see something that catches them, and it's something like Drivatar. Actually, that's not even true, because I did have a look at the stats, and only maybe about 40% of the views on the Drivatar video actually came from subscribers. So it's an interesting mix, and I think certainly like comparing it to last year is a little would be disingenuous for a number of reasons. Because last year I covered Alpha Star, Alien Isolation, Splinter Cell, Command and Conquer, The Last of Us, City Skylines. We also had the 3-part series on the Division 2 with Ubisoft. I also did the 1 episode on Watch Dogs Legion with Ubisoft. And so there's a lot of videos, there was a lot of higher profile games. And I think that's what it is. I think a lot of the time it's high profile stuff. If you're not covering big AAA games, and let's face it, a lot of the videos I just showed you a couple of slides ago weren't big AAA games. Forza was the big AAA game that I covered. And so I think that was kind of an interesting thing to kind of reconcile, and interestingly, like, finding out, okay, cool, and being comfortable with that. And I think that's an important thing, because with everything else going on, also, like I say, last year I was working part-time, doing 1 day a week as a university lecturer, doing a little bit of client work, and then actually there was a period around when the pandemic hit. I lost all my contract work died overnight because everybody was getting a bit spooked. Budgets all froze and everything. So that's what happened. And so suddenly I went from doing a lot of work to very little. And I'm like, oh no, I need to keep the lights on. And so one of the things I did in order to make sure I was keeping myself a little sane was I actually focused a lot on video production. That's why if you go back to last year, I think between February and March, I released the 3 parts on the Division. In April, I did Facade. In May, I did Alien and Fear again. In June, I did Splinter Cell. In July, I did The Last of Us and Command and Conquer. And then in September, August, I did City Skylines. So you just think about the amount of stuff I was putting out. And then funnily enough, in the July, I took on a job. I actually went part-time working at a university where I now work there 2 to 3 days a week. So very different set of circumstances, I think, and being mindful of that. Let's see. Oh, David Thomas says, I watch pretty much everything. Good on you. Yes, be more like David Thomas, please. But maybe that's not. But maybe that's because I'm not working in AI or any form of tech. Those that do work in that field are maybe more selective about what's worth watching and relevant. You know, I'd never thought of that. I've always viewed it as how hot is the game I'm covering, and although I do remember actually being called out for being repetitive because I covered Alien twice at one point. I was like, oh, thanks very much. Let's see. Mr. Happy Shop says, absolutely. After watching your Resident video, I watched all your videos. Good, Mr. Happy Shop. That's why it's a happy shop, because everyone's watching my videos. Let's see. Smokeback says, is there any game that caught your attention based on how they implemented AI this year? Yeah, but not for the reasons that you might think. I haven't actually played that many games that came out this year. I'm trying to think. Actually, I meant to go away and finish this list in my head. I'm really enjoying a lot of theatrical AI in the last couple of months. I'm middle of playing Halo Infinite. And there's a lot of subtle little behavioral quirks in the NPCs that I love in that game that I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I could make an entire video about that. Even just dumb stuff which isn't necessarily AI. Like, I'm playing Guardians of the Galaxy at the moment, and I'm really impressed with how well the characters are written and how well the dialogue works. There was a point somewhere, hang on. Let's see. Somebody said something. Kokusu, there you go. Interesting that Facade is number 9. Do you think there are any particular reasons why an NLP-related topic stood out this year? I think it's because it's Facade. People know Facade as this weird game that... what was that? Desk shook slightly. Facade is one of those really, really interesting games because it became this weird like Twitch phenomena. Whereas a lot of other games, you know, I think there's not that many high-profile games that do NLP. And I think the thing that people really find interesting about Facade isn't that it's NLP, but I do think that we should do more stuff on NLP games. Funnily enough, this is already me answering a question that comes up later in the Q&A. Let's see. Joshua says, as an intermediate software dev computer programmer, I'm sure you're more than intermediate, sir. I really enjoy your explanations about various topics. I hope your students and clients appreciate your work. Well, that seems to be going well. We're coming up to that in a couple of slides. Alan says, it's an interesting point. I'm really not into AAA games, so I tend to prefer watching technical videos or stuff like Facade. Interesting. Yeah, like I think this is one of the things that I've been very cognizant of, and particularly last year, because as you can see, over the space of 2019 and 2020, the channel got, what, just shy of 90,000 subscribers. And who those people are is a bit of a mystery to me, and what are their interests. And so I think that's one of the things I've been very quick to do, is to stop myself from getting worked up on the numbers and going, hey, why isn't, don't get me wrong, I do get a little despondent. My mental health has been a bit of a roller coaster this year as in general, but trying not to get worked up about, hey, why isn't this video blowing up? I'm now just like, you know what, if I can just keep it going, and people are just tuning in and people are enjoying it, naturally you want the numbers to continue to go up. But trying, and I've talked about this before, it's always an ongoing battle to try and make sure you feel comfortable about it, and that you're not getting upset about it. At the same time, there's a good chance you are going to get upset about it. Yeah. Oy. But yeah, I think there's a few other questions. We'll come back to them, I promise. I'm conscious I need to get through all this. On that note, given everything, a huge thank you to the Patreon supporters who've continued to support the work. There's a knock-on effect that comes with the numbers, as I said. Less subs and less views, knock-on effect of less patrons. Because one of the things that happens is, particularly last year, there was a surge in patronage on the channel because a lot of people were watching the show. And a lot of people are watching. There's a higher kind of churn rate there, or like transaction rate, where you then end up with people who watch the stuff and then go decide they want to subscribe. And so yeah, like subscribers, I think overall patronage, so the number of people supporting and the actual income, both have dropped around 20% this year. That said, it's still not bad. Overall, it's you know, my Patreon has never been huge. I think that's kind of a key thing to point out. Like, this is why I do a lot of other things, because I think the AI and Games Patreon would need to be about 4 to 5 times more successful to the point where I could actually do YouTube full time. So don't get me wrong, I am immensely grateful to everyone who supports the show. And particularly during the last year or so, it's been very difficult times for a lot of people monetarily. And so, of course, some people have bowed out because they're like, I'm sorry, but I've got to put my money elsewhere. And you do not need to be sorry about that. You have your own priorities. So I'm always really grateful that people continue to support the work. I have to explain this to my mum a lot. She doesn't really get it. And so, yeah, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you. One of the cool things I did observe with Patreon this year is big increase in annual subscriptions. So the Patreon, you can do it monthly, but we have this thing, I think like myself and NoClip and a few others do it, where it's like we can actually apply a discount if you subscribe to it for a year. And I have it at the maximum discount, which is like 16%, if I remember right, which is the equivalent of, you know, you get a good month or so off if you do it for the year. And yeah, that's actually been really interesting to see. The number of monthly subscribers have dropped, but the annual ones have gone up. And I think it's because people are then saying, okay, cool, I'm going to give you this money and that's it, done. I don't have to worry about, am I going to give you that every month? And so watching the money go out your bank account every month versus the one-off thing, I think has been an interesting change. And because it's actually a well-known phenomena of what they call the dip, which is at the start of every month, pretty much all Patreon campaigns lose money at the start of the month, because people, if you're running it monthly and people give you, you know, their monthly patronage, they then go, oh god, I'm still supporting that guy and or person and or thing, so they decide then, oh no, you know what, I'm going to stop there. Let's see. David Thomas says, I assume there are resources on Patreon looking into what people's interests are and what they're looking for or wanting to see. One of the interesting things I learned a couple of years ago is that the Patreon community, and they're great, don't get me wrong, they're a very specific niche subset of the larger viewing audience. As I just said, I have a very, you know, I've got this growing audience and trying to figure out what all their interests are. The Patreon is often a very specific niche of that. And so sometimes a topic that the patrons are like, please make this video, we want to see this video happen, and then I go and make it and the wider audience doesn't care. And then maybe a video that, in amongst all the patron voted episodes, I go and make it because I think this is a video that I think people are going to watch. And then I think the patrons generally watch them all anyway because they're supporting it, but it's not something that they were interested in. So sometimes I'll do like polls in the Patreon of like topics to cover, and sometimes the one with the least level of enthusiasm, I put it out or something. eventually down the line because I'm a bit bullish about it. And then, hey, that actually did quite well. That isn't something, I don't judge patrons for that. Like, everyone's expressing their opinion. But I think it's interesting that my Patreon community is a specific subset of the rest of the community. But even then, like, it's a very small community. So the channel has about 165,000 subscribers. I think there's only about 165 patrons. Yeah, that's not even 1%. That's like 0.1%. Someone do the math, please. But yes, thank you all to my Patreon community. You're all great. I'm always really humbled and really super appreciate that. And also thank you to everybody else who supports with YouTube memberships. There's only about 10 of them. But also people who, super chats and everything else. Like, everything you do there is super awesome, and I really appreciate it, because asking for money to do shit like this on the internet is still really weird to me. Anyway, so yeah, I'm conscious we've got questions and I want to come to that. But yeah, here's some other highlights and stuff that I've been doing. And I think, no, you know what? We'll do the getting real part after this. Let's focus on the this thing here. So key thing, let's see. Back on the talking circuit again. So I actually put myself in a holding pattern where I said I wasn't going to do any talks for a while because I was really struggling on top of everything else I was doing to focus on writing talks, because I always go out my way and try to write new talks. Or as a general rule, even if I reuse parts of an existing talk, I always reframe it for whatever I need it for. I really like to try and make a bespoke talk wherever I go. I've not done that many this year. I actually gave my first talk in Scotland ever. Or development talk. Like, I've done academic talks at a research conference in Scotland. This was the first time I ever actually did one at an event in Scotland, just for giggles, at Edinburgh College. So shout out to them. Recently, I actually gave a talk at the Google Game Developers Conference that ran at the Technical University of Dublin. They invited me to come and do that virtually, of course. That was really great. And they were really nice, and they seemed to really like that talk. I was very pleased with how that turned out. Of course, we had the first ever AI in Games Game Jam. We had around 800 sign-ups and over 100 submitted games, which blew all my expectations away. Originally, we'll talk about this later in the Q&A part, but originally the Patreon community had been nagging me. They're like, come on, do a game jam. And so we finally did it. And I thought, if 50 people and a dog turn up and do this and we get 6 games out of it, that would be amazing. So this totally exceeded my expectations. Once again, a huge thank you to our Jaminators. Carl, Bernard, Alan, Batu, and I think that's all the Jaminators. I haven't missed anybody. But yeah, thank you all to them for helping support that and helping us make that run within the Discord itself. There was a lot of teething problems just trying to get myself ready for that. But yes, super happy with how that turned out. We also had, down in the bottom left, I was the host for the AI in Games Summer School, which is hosted by Model AI, as well as on the FDG 2021 TV. I did those with Enrique Loria and Anne Sullivan, respectively, as my co-hosts. Those are super weird to do because it's essentially like an academic talk show. And we put a huge amount of time and effort into the production. A huge thank you, notably to David Melhart, and David Melhart over on the summer school side, who was very instrumental in us getting stuff running, but also Antonius Liapis, who is the producer on Summer School TV and FDG TV, and of course to Mike Cook, who worked with me. Oh no, I did say Batu, Bernard. I did say Batu, but also to Mike Cook over on FDG TV, who also did the Best Paper Watch, which, if you haven't watched it, is absolutely is so good. And it was a dumb idea that then came to life. Beer. So yes, thank you to all of them. I think that went really well. I completely missed one here, which I just want to take a moment to say. I don't have any evidence of it anywhere here, which would have been really good to have. But I launched my game Sure Footing on Xbox One and Xbox Series S and X back in May. That was a huge amount of work to get it past certification. I'd had a huge amount of problems with the dev kit that I had and a few other issues with the game itself over 2020 into 2021, but the game shipped. It's out there. I actually have a game on Xbox that I developed, and so I'm very, very pleased with that. The Switch port is pending. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see. Speaking of the Model AI supporting the AI summer school, I have been working with Model AI. So this was something we kept quiet for about 6 months. I've been working with their marketing team, with Shraddha Gupta, particularly on they're a really interesting company based out in Denmark, where they are using a lot of academic research in AI for games and then finding ways to apply that to video game production. Now, I would be a little conscious of going into bed with a company like that, were it not for the fact that I know most of them. So one of the interesting things about Model AI is I went this route. I decided to go into, well, I didn't decide to go into YouTube. YouTube happened by accident. But particularly Christopher Holmgard, who is someone that I'd known within academic spaces for a long time, started up Model AI and then managed to get a couple of well-known academics in the field, notably Julian Degelius, Yorgos Yanakakis, and Sebastian Risi, on board as kind of research oversight members. And they're doing really interesting work. And so we kind of came to an agreement last year where I'll come in and help them do videos to promote some of the work they're doing. But also we're going to have some stuff here on AI in games sometime in 2022. We're trying to figure it out, in which we're actually I'm going to go behind the scenes and you're going to see some of the stuff they're doing, because what they're doing is, in my opinion, how AI is going to change video games in the next 10 years. And they're actually doing it in applied games. They're doing it with some big companies and some small companies. Sadly, I can't say which right now because I have an NDA. Yay. But one of the weird things that came up was they had a pet project. They wanted to be able to, they're all gamers as well, and so they're like, oh, let's talk about like the big AI in games. And so what this led to, what is the History of AI series that I'm doing on Model AI, and the first 2 videos are now live. You can go find them on the Model AI YouTube channel, and it's a talking head series where we have different people from the company coming in and talking about particular games. And so the first 2 were on Left 4 Dead and then Shadow of Mordor. And one of the things you'll note if you watch those videos is I never appear in them. But I narrate them. And this was originally not something we planned on doing. This was something that Shraddha in particular was, she was like, you know what? No, these work better if you narrate them. Because when we originally, so all the episodes are written and scripted and spec'd by me, and then they sent them away and the team recorded them all, and then I edit them all together. But one of the things that Shraddha noted was I did some rough cuts of all of them with my voice. And then she said, you know what, listening to that rough and then listening to the final version, what it's missing is your voice. So can you narrate it? And so we figured out these like kind of bookends where like I talk in the opening and closing 10 seconds, which is super weird. But so the first 2 episodes have gone out. There is there's at least 10 more. I'm currently editing episodes 4, 5, and 6. We do some good stuff. Some of these are really good. I'm really looking forward to getting them out there. Let's see. Orlovsky Consulting says, quick question, state machines or tree state or behavioral AI? Well, it's really down to the problem. You just gotta find the right AI to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. I bet Shadow of Mordor is really complex AI. Well, if only they didn't patent all of it so we couldn't actually find out. What else happened this year? Working away on 2 games. So the Velociraptor you can see there, that was from a recent Steam development update post for Deathground, which, as some of you will know, is a game that got kickstarted last year, and it's been in development, full development now for about a year. We really kind of ramped up this year. Last year when the game got kickstarted, I wasn't as involved. For the past year, I've had a lot more involvement. A key thing I want to point out is I don't actually do day-to-day development on the game. I consult at a technical level and a design level. And so whenever we're trying to come up with systems and spec and design for a lot of things, I sit down with our design team. Particular shout out to Martin Darby, our creative director, who's kind of been working with myself and Francis and Momo on the design side, and then also like our AI team. Sarge Rose has been taking over tech and is doing an absolutely stellar job. But working recently with Rodolfo and Matt and Andrew and even and Benno as well on the AI over the past year has been great. We're making progress. It is a I can't really talk about it in any great detail. We're dealing with some very complex problems. One of the interesting things is we're doing dinosaurs. And so suddenly a lot of things you take for granted and things that just kind of work for a lot of other characters don't work because that's for a human. Um but yeah, it's always an interesting it's presented a lot of interesting challenges, and I think we're really hitting them. I think we're really turning a point actually in the game right now, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. Everyone's taking a much deserved break because we had all sorts of publisher reviews that were due both for this and another game. So the other game, I can't tell you what I'm doing on it yet because the game isn't formally announced and there's no acknowledgement of the game's existence. I actually was spending a bit of time today playing our campaign complete build. So if you're not familiar with the term, this is a stage of our game where the game isn't done, but the game as it stands, the full game is playable. You can play the whole game from start to end. It's buggy, it's not really great, it's, there's a lot of problems. It's unfinished, but it's playable, and it gives you a feel for the entire experience. And what we've done is the game is campaign complete, but one level has been focused on to try and get it up to as close to launch quality as we might expect. That has, and having these two games at the same, and in each case, I'm doing the same thing. So here, I don't work day to day on development, and I can't sadly name drop the developers because otherwise I'll have to reveal who it is, and then also probably by extension you might figure out what they're doing. But absolutely cracking bunch of people. They've been super nice because I'm also working with them in both studios. I'm working remotely. Jaw Drop, who make Deathground, work here in the UK, and so that's a little easier. But the other studio is overseas, so sometimes working around that is quite complicated. But we are doing some very exciting work. I feel I was playing a whole bunch of the game over the last 2 days, and I'm like, we're about to do a big AI pass, like in terms of quality, but also the encounters that we're creating and like what we want those elements to be. I'm feeling good about it. I feel like it's not there yet, but in about 3-4 months, this game is going to slap. It's going to slap hard, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. So much love to everybody over there at the studio who are just doing some amazing work. We've had some really interesting kind of iterations on design, both in gameplay as well as, and the gameplay changes are having a big impact on the AI as well. And I'm really enjoying like coming up with some of those ideas, and particularly working with our narrative team as well on reconciling like behavioral aspects of the characters with where we are in narrative and how that might shift and stuff. It's been really interesting. Oh yeah, and the last one in the bottom right corner is I flew out to South Korea. In fact, 2 weeks ago today, I was giving this talk in South Korea at AI Summit Seoul, where I was invited out to give a talk on the impact of AI in the video games industry, and that was a little scary because that's the first time I've left UK in the last 2 years, and there's been a pandemic on the go, if you haven't heard. But they were really committed to having me come over and give this talk. It was really good. I really liked that, and I really enjoyed it. And I think they enjoyed the talk as well. It's also really weird because you can see that I'm wearing a suit jacket and a shirt because I thought I should try and look somewhat modestly professional while giving this presentation. But it was a whirlwind, and I really enjoyed it. Let's see. So the Q&A time is actually one other thing. I work part-time at a university. Over half my working week is at a university. I have taught a couple of AI classes over the last year. I've also won an award for teaching this year, for the second year in a row for my intro to AI class. So I thank you to my students at King's College London for nominating me for that. That was I won a King's Education Award again, which was really good. And I think this kind of I know there's questions here, but this kind of speaks to my current state of being. I am tired. I am very tired. I have been physically and mentally exhausted, I would say. Since I got back from Korea, my exhaustion has hit a new level of exhaustion that I have not been able to process. And so the last few days have been very good. I've been winding down on work. Thankfully, all the clients I'm working for are taking a break. The university is wrapping up this week. In fact, the university closes on Friday, and it means I can actually have a break. And I am going to be taking a break, with the exception of the Patreon newsletter, which will need to be written before the new year. I'm pretty much just going to log off for the next 2 weeks. I'm not doing anything YouTube related because I need to get away from this. I am just so tired, and I've I've not been this tired in a very, very long time. And in fact, I don't think I've been this tired since, I don't actually know if I've ever been this tired. I gotta be honest with you, because we've got the pandemic, and then the impact that has on your mental health, and then the impact it has on your physical health. I've actually had a lot of physical health problems this year. Like, fortunately, like, nothing as egregious as COVID or anything else. Like, I've been very fortunate in that regard. I had to go and see an osteopath because I was having really bad back troubles, despite I actually have a pretty good setup here at my desk, but it was actually a lingering injury from my, weight training, intense weight training days of 15 years ago. And because I hadn't been hitting the gym as much, it actually flared up in a really awkward way. I'm finally getting to the end of that treatment, thanks to my osteopath. But, we've had a lot of ups and downs in our family lives, with our families, both my wife and I supporting our families, me supporting my brothers back in Scotland. Sadly, we had a death in the family not that long ago. My grandmother passed away. It's just been a lot, and we've not had a break. And I think that kind of speaks to a lot of it, is, that way you I just want a couple of days where something doesn't blow up in my face, even if it's, even work. And one of the things is that doing a lot of stuff like this, your cognitive load is always really high because you're doing so many different things, and trying to switch your brain from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, that can really wear you down. And I think that was a big issue. And certainly, like, coming back to that osteopath, one of the big things was my physical health diminished. People who know me in real life know that I'm quite a physically fit and active person. I like to go distance running a lot. And one of the big things I've struggled with since the pandemic started was I stopped going to the gym to weightlift. For a long time, that was my thing. I was a weightlifter, and big weights too, not fucking about here, you know? What people would put in a hard day, I'd call that my warm up. But yeah, I couldn't do that. My gym's all closed down. And then of course I finally think maybe I can go back to the gym because things are getting better. And then my back went, and at one point the only exercise I could do was I would go out for a walk because I was so physically broken. Thankfully I'm doing much better. I've been back in the gym for about a month now. I'm losing weight. I'm rebuilding, a bit of shape is coming back in here, which is great. And that's helping alleviate my mood. Certainly, that's actually been really, really good. But yeah, and for me this was such a big thing because when I used to get really stressed during my PhD, my wife and I have joked that you could tell how intense my PhD was because you could tell by how physically fit I was. No body fat. Like, I went through a phase where I was either constantly weightlifting like a lot, or I was running so much I had no body fat on, because that was how I regulated. And then the last year, because I couldn't regulate like that, I think that's just made things worse. So yeah, taking a break, taking a break. What recharges you or fills you up when you're burnt out, says Michael. Exercise, but I couldn't do that for a long time. Actually, I like to read. And I don't do it as much, but I play guitar, I can draw. Creative things are often useful to me. And I think one of the things particularly is difficult for this line of work is video games become increasingly more laborious because they often overlap with the YouTube. So yeah. Um, let's see. There was a whole bunch of questions earlier up there, but we're going to get to them in a little bit. Let's see. But yeah, I'm tired. I need a break. I'm looking forward to my break. But the thing is it hasn't demotivated me. And we already talked about the fact that the YouTube numbers are down, and that's because I'm doing all this other stuff. And it doesn't demotivate me. I'm probably more motivated than ever, and I have got stuff in motion for things I'm going to do in the next year. We have new ideas and new stuff that's going to come out, and I'm going to talk about that later. Because already this session's already running. We're already like an hour into this stream, I'm pretty sure, and yeah, we're already about an hour into the stream, and we haven't even got to the main Q&A part yet. But yeah, hang on a second. So yeah, here we go. Let's get into the questions. There's a whole bunch of questions, and I'll try and answer some of the ones in the chat as well. I'll go back through some of these, but key thing was these were all submitted by either patrons or they were submitted over on the community tab in advance. So first up, one of several by Bernard. Bernard's clearly exploiting his position as a patron. Head to the Patreon. You can just submit all these questions nice and early. So this was an interesting one. I've tried to intersperse Bernard's questions all over the place because he had so many. In the Patreon newsletter, we talked about this a couple of months ago, that the horse video on Red Dead Redemption 2 was getting great feedback from the community, and in particular some people at the studio from Rockstar, but not doing exceptionally well when it came to views. It's not done that well. It's got maybe 15,000 views or something like that. But what kind of feedback, results, or metrics drive your creative process the most? And I guess one of the things is, I don't think it drives me, but certainly it is a mechanism that provides a sense of relief, is that when the creators of the thing that I made the video about watch the video, they don't hate it. That is always the biggest concern I have for a lot of these videos, is I am making a video about something that someone made, someone put a lot of time and energy into. And yes, it is a commercial product. I don't actually care about the commercial product side of it. I care more about the fact that there is a whole bunch of developers who are working their asses off trying to make this a thing, or it's a thing that an academic small research team or an individual researcher was working away on. It is something that they are putting their energy into, they are putting their enthusiasm into and their time into, and I want to make sure it does it justice. So I'm always a little terrified of, oh god, what happens if the developer finds it? And funnily enough, so when the Red Dead video came out, a lot of the Red Dead and Rockstar game fan communities found that video, and it started bouncing around on social media. But then also Tobias Claytonhouse, the gentleman who made the GDC talk that the video was based on, had found the video and then shared it online on Twitter, and he spoke highly of it. He said, oh yeah, it's great, it was, he enjoyed it, and also that it was great to see. I think also because Tobias actually worked on Alien Isolation, so he's now actually had two games, two videos based on the stuff that he's done, and so he was quite happy about that. And so like that's a huge sigh of relief for me, and it's always a kind of an interesting barometer of, I am still getting this right and I haven't got it wrong yet. I actually think I actually like to see how people react to the information. Does this result in a newfound level of appreciation? Do people talk about it? Are people talking about the video on Twitter? Are they talking about it in the chat? And I think that's always an interesting thing of, how are people resonating with the video beyond, oh, that was a cool video. But one of the, and so this comes up in a number of ways. It can appear in the comments, it can appear in socials, occasionally it appears in the press, because a video I make, someone at Taku or Eurogamer or something like that posts it because they're like, hey, that was a cool video, you should watch this. I don't think any of that's happened this year, which actually might relate to some of the view numbers, because quite a few of the videos are released last year. Like, whoever it is, I don't know which particular gentleman it is over at Kotaku Australia who likes to share my videos. I love that person, because I get nice spikes of views off the back of that. Also, Eurogamer, I believe, has shown a couple of my videos a few times. One of the things I actually do really value, that doesn't happen that often, is actual constructive criticism. Because it's the internet. So you either get, this video was great, or fuck this video, it was shit. Nothing really in the middle. So yeah, that's always a problem. And I really would like getting useful, constructive feedback on, like, this was the bit of the video I really liked, this is the bit of the video I didn't like, this is how I think maybe that could have been better. By all means, patrons, if you, maybe we have a feedback corner where no judgment, you can be like, this is why that video was crap. Like, that would actually be useful, because the thing is, like, when you do this stuff, I have no idea what it is I'm doing that's working. It's a gut instinct. And one of the hardest things about what I do is that every episode, I'm not one of these content creators who jumps to the next. You know, it's not like somebody who does all they do is Minecraft videos, or all they do is Call of Duty videos. Like, I jump from one extreme to another, you know? This year, I was looking at niche little indie games, very popular racing games, and the biggest cowboy simulator that's ever been made. It's a bit of a jump, you know? So I think that's always an interesting problem to kind of get around. See, I'm going to quickly scroll back up. Let's see. Orlovsky was talking a lot about particular books. I actually can't show you all the books because all the books are hiding behind the green screen, but I think every book that's been mentioned here I already own. Josh says, touching on the RDR2 horse video, do you foresee a day where advanced systems driven by AI and other techniques would be able to provide a template for something like realistic quadruped movement? Look, we're already there. There's a lot of really interesting research coming out on training, their motion, they're doing motion capture off of dogs and then training AI systems to reproduce an animation system that is reflective of that. There's some really cool stuff that actually Ubisoft La Forge just published a whole bunch more stuff that they've been doing as well with ragdolls, training them to replicate existing animations that have been motion captured and then allowing them to be more adaptive to the physics constraints. Utterly fascinating stuff. Let's see. There was a comment. Where is it? There was a comment that I just saw earlier. Alan says, I find teaching exhausting because you also have to be constantly hyped about the stuff you teach. It's great, but it consumes you. It does. It's really, really difficult you have to give a shit about it. And I think this is the simple thing. If you're someone who's interested in academia, if you're interested in teaching, that is the number one thing that you will get so far in that field off the back of giving a shit. Because see, if that passion is there, your students feed off it so much. I actually don't think I'm that great a lecturer. I'm just a lecturer who's very excited and passionate about the things I teach, and I think that lets me get away with so much. Solid Reactor's got a question that I already know. This question's already in there. I know it's already in my Q&A. I'm going to get to it. Question. Thomas actually, in my humble opinion, the content is really good. Thank you. It can still be useful to give constructive criticism on good videos, though, like, I like this part specifically. Yes. Like, I am not one to shy away from constructive criticism, because that is how anybody gets better at anything. Like, I am my own worst critic. I still see the fault in every single video I've made. I am getting really annoyed right now because there's one tiny editing bug in the Rami video that just went out on EDF, and I don't know if anyone else has spotted it, but it appeared very late in the edit, and it is driving me nuts that I missed it. Alan Carstairs. Hello, Alan. I've recommended your videos to fellow students in the past. You're insightful and very easy to follow in your videos. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you. Good. Right. I think I might be doing something right. Jumping over to another one here. Oh, no. I forgot to jump. There we go. Doc Campbell. What are your overall thoughts on how the AI in Games Jam went? Is this something you think you'll do again in the future? Or was it more trouble than it was worth? First of all, really pleased to see so many people jump on board. Like I said earlier, if I was expecting 20 people and a dog to do this, this is something that the Patreon community in particular have been asking for. And they were asking for it for a little while. And I remember in 2020, they asked me to do it. And I kept threatening I was going to do it. And then in 2021, I said, right, fine, I'll do it, we'll do it. We ended up being featured it was a featured jam on itch.io. We had close to 1,000 signups, and then a whole bunch of people backed out at the end because, and I think this is maybe something to take on board, is the week-long time frame to make a game was quite difficult. One of the challenges is that you're spending a week, because a lot of games with AI take more than a 48-hour game jam, and this is why we made it a week, because a lot of other game jams only last 48 hours. But building an AI system can be quite complicated, so we gave it a week, and even then some people felt that wasn't enough. I feel we need to stick to a week. I think more than a week is too much. I'm really pleased with some of the games. I made a video about it. Some of the games were amazing, and I was really a bit gutted that I couldn't participate. But again, Carl, Batu, Bernard, Alan were huge help in doing this, because originally I was trying to do this myself. I was going a little spare, and then they stepped up to support me, and it was great. So once again, a huge thank you to my Jaminators. We wouldn't have done it without them. And one of the things I would like to do if we do it again, there's two things. First of all, try and work on some more useful material to help onboard people, tutorials and stuff like that, which, is always a challenge for me to do. But also time it better. So here's a fun story. As some of you might know, the AI and Games Jam ran the week before the Great Game Makers Toolkit Jam, which of course GMTK Jam is the biggest jam on itch these days. It's absolutely massive. And one of the funny things is I was trying to do so many things in around April, May time, when I was trying to spec it all together, because it's the end of the semester. There was publisher deadlines on the games. There was a bunch of other stuff going on, and I was a little stretched thin. A recurring theme. I finally came up with a date, and I said, right, that's the date, we'll do it. And then I sat on it for a few days because I needed to put together the launch material and the prep for that, and I didn't have time to do it. In amongst that, the GMTK Jam got announced. And so I was like, oh shit. So I had to move the date, because originally, I think the AI and Games Jam ended the day the game, or they overlapped to a point where now it was no longer plausible. And I was like, oh no. So we moved it forward a week, because also I think if we ended up on the same week or the week after, no one would do it. So we felt, right, we'll do it the week before maybe. And then if people really want to also go and do the GMTK Jam, they can also do it. So we did it. It was great. People still participated. I'm super happy about it. Some people did back out because they said it's too close to the GMTK Jam. That's totally fine. At the time, I'm like, maybe I should speak to Mark Brown over at GMTK. Like, I've spoken to Mark a couple of times on Twitter, but never any serious point. Mark reaches out to me a couple of weeks later and says, hey, I just realized that my jam kind of was right after your jam, and I'm sorry I stepped on your toes or anything like that. He was, he was very kind about it. And I said, no, look, this is actually my fault, because the thing is, Mark tends to hold his jams later in the summer, so I held my jam earlier in the summer, and then he brought his forward. And so we both agreed the solution to this is next year we're going to talk to each other in advance about when we're going to run our game jams, so we don't run them around the same time as each other. So I think I want to try and come back and do it again. And I think it would be fun. Well, for one, I think Mark and I can maybe avoid clashing with one. And I think we're going to make an effort to do that, because my jam was quite big. His jam is huge at this point. So we're going to find a way to avoid one another. But yeah, it was funny. It was just one of those things, but it was really nice. Actually, he didn't have to reach out to me like he did, but he did. And so I very much appreciate that. What was happening in the chat there briefly? Really appreciated the week limit for the jam, says Ezra. Solid Reactor. Could be cool if AI in games would collab with GMTK, especially now when Mark is making a game on Unity from scratch. Maybe help him in the AI parts. I don't have that time, but that's funny. Stuart McIntyre. Merry Christmas, sir. Actually, where's my Iron Brew? Need fluids. Here we go. Let's see. Michael Day, I'm greedy for quality feedback, good or bad. That I hadn't already spotted. That's good. Okay. Ezra, would you consider doing more in-depth technical stuff? We have a question on that in the slides. I'm going to come back to that. Orlovsky says, what are the AI challenges for different types of platforms, particularly consoles or indie? Make sure it runs. Make sure it works. Adapting anything over to a console platform, and this has certainly been an interesting thing, is making sure that it will actually still run sufficiently on that hardware And then I find it very interesting dealing with the optimizations that come up as a result of that. We're dealing a lot with this on both games I'm working on, even though we're targeting modern platforms. Optimization is always a real challenge. The Spuddertron, Merry Christmas. I love your channel, man. Thank you. Mads Fjada, thank you very much for the super chat. What game has the best AI? I don't know. That's what this series is about, is me trying to find it. When I find the game with the best AI, I'm just going to stop the channel and I'm going to delete it. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I think it's always a case of finding a good AI that suits the purposes of the game that you are creating. Heck, I just made a video about why I think Earth Defense Force is amazing, because the AI in it is actually really, really good for what that game is trying to do. Even though the rest of the game's kind of janky. Like, I could have made more of that video just being about, oh, the AI is so good in Earth Defense Force, and I didn't. You know, I think what I like to do, and I think what AI in games is about, is celebrating great AI in games and how it's done. And I think that's the key thing. Because also one of the interesting, Alan steps up and says creatures. Go and watch Alan's video on creatures. Maybe one day I'll make my own video on creatures. Actually, I have done a video on creatures. It's one of the history of AI videos for Model AI. Keep an eye out for that in the new year. But yeah, it's always I find it funny that I went out my way to wear my AI in games t-shirt and you can't see it because of the camera angle. Right. Moving on. Thank you to Doc Campbell for sending that in. Batu, who's of course one of the Jaminators. What could happen in an ideal world to foster greater academic game AI / game industry AI connections? And I think there's a really simple answer to this. That a big problem for many years is academics and developers didn't talk to each other, and then when they did, they talked over each other. Academics don't have a grasp of industry problems a lot of the time, and I think that is better now than it was. I think when I did my PhD, we didn't really have a grasp on what are the things that the games industry is worried about. Now I think academia has a better idea of that. Not that they should be in service to that. I still think that one of the great things about academic research is we can lean into weird, dumb shit, which actually has really, really powerful really powerful results and great opportunities down the line. Something like the generative design in Minecraft is not something a games studio is interested in, but it could yield returns down the line. Work by, some of the interactive fiction work that for many years was a niche toy is eventually going to be something that is going to become valuable in the industry. I think Emily Short, who I worked with on the AI Summit for GDC, Emily's often been this weird thing of doing like niche, quirky interactive fiction projects and then working over at Fail Better Games at the moment, and then with Spirit AI. And so she's been a really great advocate of experimenting with weird stuff that can potentially also then yield actual value in the industry at a later date. Let's see, and we rarely share the same dissemination spaces. So an academic's naturally inclined to go and publish at a conference like NeurIPS or COG or FDG, whereas game studios will publish at GDC or DICE. And then, of course, trying to get game studios to actually come out and be public about the stuff that they did in their games is also a real challenge. So trying to build those bridges, I think, is often a really useful thing to do. And kind of one of the things I try to do is to be someone who can try and bring these two spaces together. Although admittedly, I don't think I've done a great job on the academic side of late. So big apology to all my academic friends out there wondering why I'm not covering the cool research. And I think there is a lot of work in this space already, like the Intelligent Games and Gaming Intelligence Consortium, which is a doctoral training centre here in the UK, is a really good example. It's a PhD training programme where people actually go and work in a company that is going to maybe use AI, and they do research projects in collaboration with like video game studios and film companies and tech companies that is industry relevant, but also there's a lot of opportunity for it to be explored within academic spaces. Ubisoft La Forge, which is the R&D unit they have, is actually a collaboration between Ubisoft and McGill University. And so it's bringing people in from those two spaces to work together on maybe things that aren't industry relevant now, but could be a couple of years from now. And some of the stuff that they've done at LaForge has been shipped in Ubisoft games. And so I think that is really powerful. And it's also given them access to tools and systems and scale and scope that the games industry is comfortable with, that academic spaces don't grasp. So I think that's a really great way to do it. And even then, I think, like, to answer the second part, given that we don't live in an ideal world, can we work on even smaller collaborations? Can we find smaller indie studios that can maybe collaborate with someone? Even bearing meaningful fruit. And it's often really difficult because the problem is that game studios are working on a tight deadline. Game studios have got a game to ship. They don't really have time to explore, as much as academics and PhD students are on a fixed time frame, they're kind of exploring in a much more interesting space of thoughts of possibility. Whereas with a game studio, you're trying to ship the damn thing and you're always running against time and budget. And so I think that's why things like LaForge are interesting, because it's being funded by a AAA publisher, but it's detached from the studio. It's not like they have to deliver this stuff so that it's going to appear in the next Assassin's Creed. Although there is a mandate, I know this, that there is a mandate that what they're doing should eventually yield positive outcomes for a future product. They're not turning around and saying to them, you need to get this thing working by September because Assassin's Creed ships in October. Even then, that's ridiculous. You wouldn't get it finished working in September for it then to be shipped a month later. But anyway, also holding events that entice both parties to attend. I think like Nuclei, which used to run in Europe, was a really great example of that. And I helped actually organize some of the tracks for Nuclei, where we were bringing academics and industry people together. And also that was where some of the YouTube stuff really began to kick off. That's where the Alien Isolation video came from, funnily enough. Moving on. Matt H. Gaming, who said, you did the video about games discourse being broken. Oh, yes, I did. So what would you suggest gamers can do to help improve and repair it? It's a tough one. So don't shoot the messenger, I think. I already said. I ended up on the Gamergate subreddit, so that was fun. I think one of the simplest things, and the fans have never learned this, is vote with your damn wallet. Stop pre-ordering games and scrutinize the games that you're interested in before you go out and buy them. Because bullshit marketing will continue to get away with bullshit marketing if you throw money at it. It's that simple. And I don't think that's ever going to get fixed. I mean, I would encourage that you pay closer attention to how games are made. And, watch my stuff, watch things like NoClip. Watch other channels that are interested in really cracking into how the meat is made. I think that how the sausage is made. I think it's really important to just develop a greater understanding for the medium, because one of the things that you notice on social media is 99% of hot takes by gamers are just uninformed bullshit, utter nonsense. And one of the things that really annoys me is a lot of Twitter will jump to defend themselves rather than just, and they quote tweet it, they ratio it, but in turn it actually just makes those voices louder. And it's like, oh God, whenever somebody made a bad hot take and then it ends up proliferating around Twitter, and then the whole of Twitter has to defend it for a day or so, and it just drives me nuts. I'm like, can we not just dismiss these people as idiots and move on? Because a lot of the time they're not going to listen to you. That's the problem. And I guess don't get caught up in the hype. I'm one of these incredibly cynical people. I don't watch the Game Awards. I don't really pay attention to E3 or Gamescom. I won't watch the Game Awards because I have absolutely no intent of supporting anything Jeff Keighley does. Because I think Jeff Keighley is nothing but a shill. Do I think... And also, a general point, I don't like the Game Awards because they spend so much of that not celebrating the games that are actually winning awards or being nominated for awards, but to advertise the games that are coming out next year. And that's why I won't watch the Game Awards. Even though I know people who have been nominated for awards at the Game Awards, and I'm super happy for them, and I'm so proud to see them having that moment of success, but I will not support that nonsense because you're just feeding into the system. Jeff Keighley can do one. I'm sure he's a lovely gentleman, but I just do not believe in the stance that he takes on how we continue to promote this industry. And particularly this year, of all years, when it would have been very good for someone to come up and make a particular stance about working conditions at a couple of very high profile publishers and studios, and he decided not to do it because it wasn't Hideo Kojima. Oh yeah. So yeah, there's that. Be more skeptical of streamers than journalists. One of Gamergate and things of its ilk have turned the community away from journalists to the point that they believe that journalists are all paid off and have no real and are all corrupt and won't give an honest and valid critique of games. And yet, funnily enough, everyone then goes and complains about them when they give you an honest and valid critique of a game that you really, really love. Streamers, on the other hand, are being offered more and more money to say nice things. I made a joke on Twitter a couple of days ago about how 2021 wouldn't be over until I got another offer to advertise Raid Shadow Legends. I've had 3 this week. It's all nonsense. And they're just here. How much would it cost to get this amount of time in one of your videos talking about how great this game is and trying to get people to play it? And that is where, and a lot of marketing companies know that's where the money is. To go out and actually use streamers as a mechanism to drive engagement. And so I don't watch streamers playing pre-release of games because I don't trust them. I'm always interested to see a game, if maybe a game I'm not 100% convinced by, I'll go watch a streamer, but maybe it's a streamer that I know a little bit or I've seen them play a few times, or it's a friend of a friend, or a friend even, and just trying to see what getting their opinion on it is. Because I think a lot of the time pre-release and launch streams, I think, you can't trust them at all because they're being paid. A lot of them are. I know because I know quite a few of them who tell me they're being paid. And that's their thing. If that's what they're doing, fine. But don't treat that as gospel. Criticize and critique everything. I think it's really healthy to be able to enjoy something and critique it at the same time. And I'm very critical of numerous aspects of the games industry. And I love games. I love playing games. I love my time in games. I love working on games. But at the same time, I am very, very critical of a lot of what happens in games and what those games are. But yeah, Stuart McIntyre, 50% of people are below average. This mantra helps my expectations of the world. 50%, that's such a higher estimate than I expected. Let's see. The only good thing Jeff Keighley did was demolishing Angry Joe, said Nero Smith. Like, Angry Joe, I think, is the epitome of... I can't speak really because I haven't watched Angry Joe in a long time, but the notion of what Angry Joe is about, I think, is actually the epitome of everything I don't want to do. Because it's the anger, using anger as a mechanism to drive hype towards yourself and whatever it is you do. For years, you never actually saw me on here. You never heard me talk. Well, you heard me talk. You never actually saw my face because I kind of refused to make myself a public spectacle. And also, I try to avoid giving opinions on a lot of things. I've talked about this before, how all the games that you cover in the main series, I never turn around and tell you whether I like them, because I probably don't like as many of them as you think. Bongo Baggins says, if loads of people tell me a game is great, I'll install it from Game Pass, play it, realise it's crap and uninstall it. It doesn't really matter anymore. I do think Game Pass is actually very good in that regard, in that it allows you allows you to explore games in a way that you couldn't before. In that notion of, that game looks, all right, I'll install it. You play it around for an hour and you go, all right, well, cool. And you move on to the next one. Sadly, it does say a lot about game ownership and the kind of speculative nature of what games are and the kind of disposable media, but it does allow you to experiment in a game and discover that you really like it and that you weren't expecting that. And there's a few games on Game Pass this year that I picked up and I'm like, you know what? This is much better than I expected. Or I pick a game up on Game Pass, realize I really like it, and then I go and buy it on Switch because I realize I'd rather play it on my Switch than play it on my Xbox. And yeah, just the last thing, stop with this consumerist attitude. Like, there's so many people who are just fanboys through and through, and you see it on social media again. It's like, their banner image is their bedroom, which is just covered in PlayStation memorabilia or Xbox memorabilia, because that is their identity. Is they're a PlayStation, they're a PSN gamer, and I'm like, that's just the saddest thing. You can enjoy games and not have it become your entire life, Um, David Thomas, I have no idea who Jeff Keighley is, but I feel I should go to Wikipedia rather than ask you. He's the guy that hosts the Game Awards. BB says, bring back game demos. I'm all for it. Let's see. Is there an area in games where you think AI is currently underused? Bernard asked this on Patreon, and then Alan Zacconi also asked a very similar question on YouTube. I feel like narrative design is a really big area. Not to say narrative and AI don't overlap, but I think there's a lot of interesting possibility in how you can use AI systems to engage in narrative design. You know, there's been a significant body of work in interactive fiction, but we're increasingly in situations where narrative needs to adapt to player agency and trying to give interesting story decision points or better contextual narrative in the context of gameplay. But the reason we don't see a lot of that yet is it's really hard. And there's a lot of work still to be done in areas of like natural language processing. It's not a solved problem. Yeah, that's a really simple, quite and simple answer to that one, but I'd love to see more of it. Solid Reactor. Where can I start learning AI and machine learning in the context of games using Unreal Engine with you, me, as the tutor, on an online video learning platform like Udemy or similar sites? Take my money, god damn it. Nothing on this to say right now. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still mulling it over. As I mentioned earlier, I am exhausted. I do not have any time or energy to do something like this right now, but something I would definitely like to consider more in the future. But if I can get myself in a position where I can take your money in an ethically and morally responsible way while still delivering what you want, I will do so. Bernard again. Assume someone works in the tech industry, okay then, has years of experience in maths and programming, but not specifically in AI or ML. Any advice on how to gain AI ML knowledge and experience that might get valued by a potential future employer in the games industry? This was not in relation to himself, as I recall. I think there's a lot of really accessible tools now if you want to actually start getting a feeling. You know, anybody who's interested in experience in getting any interest in ML is starting to play around with things like PyTorch in Python or using TensorFlow. There's so many like really great accessible tutorials and tool sets around this right now, or even use the Unity ML toolkit in Unity, which is built off the back of TensorFlow, if I remember right. You know, you've got things like that. Go and look at Francoise Chalet's book on Introduction to Deep Learning. I believe the second edition of that's coming out early next year. There's the DeepMind Reinforcement Learning series that was taught at UCL. That's publicly available. It's a full lecture series. You can go and look at it. And I think one of the great things, particularly if you have a background in maths and programming, is if you can show technical competence, but also a mathematical underpinning to what is happening in machine learning, that'd be great. Because it's a big problem right now with a lot of people being spun out very quickly into machine learning developers and everything else, is they figure out how to smash stuff together in Python using PyTorch or whatever else, but they don't really understand the underlying maths. And even I struggle with some of the underlying maths. Having that mathematical and statistical background, that is what separates you from the average ML person to somebody who's actually going to really make it, I think. But that's my humble opinion. Nero Smith, he's the Dorito Pope. Forgot about the Doritos. Let's see. Nero Smith says, I'm a 3D artist and amateur UE4 Unity user. Any recommendations as to how to tackle AI for games in those engines? Like, I think there's a lot. Unity's got a bigger uphill battle because a lot of Unity doesn't have great AI tools built into it, and the onboarding is very difficult if you want to build it yourself. UE4, much faster. There's a lot of great tools that also build atop the existing AI frameworks in Unreal Engine, which I think are great. But yeah, as T Swaggett says, Unity AI plugins are a good place to explore as well. I prefer my streamers without shirts, says General Sorrow. You mean as in just it's okay for me to wear a t-shirt, or you want me to take my shirt off? Not drank that much. Let's see. Deagle.New Zealand said, what trends in game design or development do you think we should see more of? What trends do you want to see less of industry-wide in the future? I mean, I don't have a huge number of thoughts on this because ultimately it's quite personal, and I respect that a lot of people like stuff that I don't. Um, so I guess one thing would be, um, let's see, bounce back on single player focused experiences, and particularly coming back to natural language processing and narrative design as well, narrative driven games. I think it's great to see a bounce back towards this, that the industry is moving back towards it a little bit, because for a long time they tried to avoid it. And well, not necessarily tried to avoid it, but they thought, oh, hang on, we actually want to do multiplayer everywhere. And so moving back into really interesting narrative spaces, I think is great. Single player focused storytelling is always fun. I would like to see a greater emphasis on storytelling and how you can merge these. And it comes back to narrative design again, like how can you build these things together, and can we find interesting ways to exploit AI in those spaces? Funnily enough, I'm in the middle of working on a Smoke and Mirrors episode for patrons I'm in the middle of playing a lot of Control. And Control, to me, is a game that is solid 7 out of 10 in gameplay, but is elevated by its art design and its writing. I think the writing in that game actually makes the whole thing pop that little bit better. I actually think the combat is good but not great. Actually, I think the combat gets a lot better the more abilities you unlock. In the first couple of hours, I don't think the combat in Control was very good. Excuse me. And then it really elevates itself down the line. But the writing is what kept me with it. But yeah, I'm really tired of open world games at this point. We've got this real kind of quality quantity imbalance of just so much stuff. I think I really struggle with the Ubisoft model of like, here's the world and 800 things to do. Even though, like, funnily enough, one of the games I've spent more time in and I really enjoyed, I finally finished Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild this year. And that is a game with a lot of stuff in it, but it obfuscates where it is and it makes you go and explore it. And I think the focus on exploration rather than ticking off the checklist um, is actually what makes that game work. Actually, Joshua just points out control physics. The control physics are amazing. The destruction physics are so good. And I think that's, again, I think the core combat is good, and it's all the things around it. Like when you actually do telekinesis and you rip a bit of the ground out, or you rip something, you rip like a bit of concrete off a pillar, and it's actually part of the destruction physics on the pillar. You're like, oh, that just looks amazing, and it sounds great, and the whole experience really comes together. Moving away from annualized sequels and actually focusing on valuable iterative design. I actually think one of the great things that battle royales have done, or live service shooters, is they've actually made studios focus more on iterative design and how they can actually innovate within an existing space and improve what they've already done, rather than just forcing the studio to just slap something else out within a very short time frame. I'm hoping, and even I think it's interesting to see things like more recently, like I think the current Call of Duty isn't doing terribly well because it's not a game that people are that interested in, but also it's just, why don't you just focus? And I know it's because you're doing it for money. Focus on just delivering solid campaign maybe every couple of years and just one multiplayer engine that you iterate on. Because even the people I know who like Call of Duty have really fell off Vanguard because, well, the last one, the Modern Warfare reboot was a big change, and it was a positive change that people liked. And then Cold War came along, and people were like, well, yeah, it's not really the same, and it's not as good. And then this one, well, a lot of diminishing returns. But yeah, I feel like, interestingly, free to play has become an interesting space in which valuable iterations on existing game design models is becoming fun. The only problem is that then you're not going to get a huge change between releases, because or between versions of a particular game, because it's got to be the same game. And so eventually, it would be great if Respawn went out and made Titanfall 3. They're probably very focused on their next Star Wars project and also on Apex, but what are the big things that they've learned from making Apex that they could feed into Titanfall, for example? Let's see. Got a couple more. Bernard again. Is there research into Drivatar like imitation of player behavior in other genres than racing, fighting games, for example? Well, oh, excuse me a second. That was horrible. Ian says, "Oh, Wildermyth. I really want to get around to playing that. I haven't had a chance." So yeah, to answer this question, we had the episode back in 2017 on case-based reasoning and killer instinct, which was using imitation of player behavior to create shadow clones of the player. I think that was like episode 15 or 16 or something like that. Very similar, but it's a different approach to Drivatar. Increasingly popular for NPC generation games, and I think there's some, Model AI who I'm doing this work for, as well as companies like Seed at Electronic Arts, which is their R&D unit, are doing a lot of work in the space of trying to figure out how to bootstrap AI in games by using imitation learning. Because one of the things it enables you to do is you already have an existing AI that's ready to go. But it's an interesting problem that's already existed by value of accumulation of data, and then how much data do you need to train off the back of that? I think one of the great sort of misconceptions that emerged out of AlphaStar is, all right, great, now every game can create AI like AlphaStar for StarCraft 2. They can't, because the AlphaStar system was, one, very expensive to train, but two, they based it on years of high profile, they had all these replays of high profile players that they could base it off of to bootstrap it. How do you have high profile, like, they were using high profile competitive players replays to train AlphaStar with? You don't have that when the game's in development. Heck, the game doesn't work when you're in development. So there's this really interesting chicken and egg problem that exists with imitation learning. And there's some really interesting stuff. Like, I know Model AI have done this, where like soft launches of games in some markets are used to then accumulate enough data to train AI to then appear in the full launch of the game. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting problem. We're going to see more of it. And in fact, I just realized the next question, which is from T Swaggett: what developments in machine learning for games, both in academia and industry, are you most excited about? It is that previous question. I think that is really exciting. I'm really excited to see where that goes. And I feel like there's a lot of scope there for some really cool innovation, both in terms of just learning from players and then what can we do with that, but also then how can we use it to kickstart and build interesting AI characters as part of a production pipeline as well. Also, thank you for hosting the AI Summer School TV this year. You were amazing. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Nearly there. I think that's actually the last one that was sent in. That was the last one that was sent in. Let's see. Thomas Anderson, you sent this question in earlier and I missed it. Why does AI fail, given that there are good game agent AIs and given the techniques you've talked about? How is it that games still get released where the AI, for lack of a better term, sucks? Because we're not trying to make good agents. We're trying to make fun agents. I think that's actually the real trick here. Oh, Zumba Pup. Hello. Imitation learning is definitely coming along. Lots of it from the robotics field. I think it's a very exciting area. We do have a video in the pipeline talking about imitation learning, funnily enough. So yeah, Thomas, we're trying to make something that's fun. We need to make something that's scalable and flexible for a variety of different circumstances. Every time the game changes, it's a new capacity for the AI to break, and as a result, you're constantly in this kind of battle of, as the game is improving, you need to fix the AI. We're actually experiencing this on the other game I can't talk about, where I think the AI in that game was really good a few months ago, but then the game has been iterated upon and the AI has now fell behind. Playing through the campaign recently, the AI has improved a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Full credit to the programmers who have been smashing away at that. And I'm still seeing gaps that we need to fix. And so it's a lot of these different things coming together. And as Orlovsky says, a lot of it is also down to time. How much time do you have? And certainly in the case of Cyberpunk, that was clearly a case where that game should not have been shipped. That game was not ready and they rushed it out the door. And I think that was a real detriment to the developers, who were probably could have done even more work to, could have done a lot more work to fix that up. And they really wanted it. Zumba Pup says, I'm building machine learning mod. I remember this. Yeah, machine learning models that learn from watching videos for game cinematography and AI behavior learning. Need to check that out at some point. That sounds really interesting to me. Fake Enema says, why do you think game AI devs tend to rely so heavily on existing AI techniques rather than try to create new ones, whereas for other game systems we tend to approach every problem like it's a new one? One of the problems is, well, a lot of the time we rely on existing AI techniques because we know they work and they are scalable to some extent. They are easier for designers to interpret. They are more debuggable and they can fit within a production pipeline a little bit better. This isn't to say that there is not a desire to try and come up with new techniques or new approaches. Also, it isn't to say that we don't approach every problem like it's a new one, because the thing is that your AI that works perfectly fine in one game, you move it into the next game and it's not going to work, and there's all these other design considerations that come up. I was actually chatting with a friend who is involved in a big AAA studio recently about their R&D, and they have understood, and this is a very famous studio who's done a lot of really cool stuff with some cool AI in it, and they were talking about how, even they find it difficult to innovate, and the risk that is attached. Actually, Zumba Pup just nailed it. The risk attached to investing time and energy into something that doesn't work, and then you've still got a game to ship. How do you fall back? And sometimes the answer is you can't fall back. And so that's why I think a lot of the really interesting innovations in machine learning are coming from places like EA Seed and Ubisoft LaForge and like Microsoft Research helping a game studio like we saw with Drivatar, is because they're working with an external unit that can invest time and energy into this and minimize the risk as much as possible. And so, yeah, I think that's really it. Dave Thomas, what do you imagine the next steps are for game AI, whether based on curiosity from academics or developers or need? Game AI is specific, because I think the next real innovation for AI is we're beginning to see some really cool stuff in other areas. So in fact, when I went to give that talk in Korea, I almost didn't talk at all about how AI can, or the big innovations in machine learning and deep learning for AI characters. I actually talked about everything else. I was talking about, texture upscaling, talking about quality assurance, talking about cheat detection of voice, like localization tech. There was a really good talk. No, I can't remember it sufficiently to explain it, so I'm not going to mention it. Yeah, like production tasks, Zumba. I think that's absolutely it. I think that's definitely, we're really kind of tackling that notion of how can we use AI, and that was it. So I saw a really interesting article about is it the Ascent, which is a game that came out not that long ago. It's on Game Pass. You should check it out. And Neon Giant revealed that they teamed up with a sound design team. They used an AI-powered tool that allowed them to create custom voices for new lines of dialogue. And the team has 800 lines of dialogue for 40 different non-player characters were created using this tool for side missions. And that is like a really interesting way to speed up production and enable for particular aspects of production that are time consuming and expensive, particularly for certain studios of certain sizes, to get a variety and get the quality they need in a more effective way. I think there's also going to be an issue there around how developers are treated as a result, because let's face it, if we're using AI for quality assurance, certain quality assurance teams sometimes aren't treated well at the best of times. The current situation over at Activision a good example of that. But yeah, I feel like that's a really exciting space um, for for like where AI can be applied. I think actually when it comes to game AI, I'm really excited to see all the animation stuff that's coming out. Um, how we're using machine learning to like really improve animation controllers, and even this new stuff that Ubisoft LaForge just showed off, where they were doing training the old motion matching with ragdoll agents, ragdoll character models. I thought was just fantastic because it looked so damn good. I feel like that's going to solve a lot of animation problems in the coming years. It's really cool. Hiencast says, do you think ML is a viable tool for AI for indie devs? Depends what you're using it for. I think for characters right now, in the grand scheme of things, no. I don't think it's there yet. And I think looking at something like the Unity ML toolkit, I feel like it needs to get there faster. I feel like there's a need for a better engagement with the industry and how to communicate how machine learning works. Because one of the problems here is that AI is already complicated enough. You then also need to have a background in ML to really understand how to use these tools sufficiently. It's one of these things that you're now going to get a whole new swathe of specialists moving into studios. You're not going to have just AI programmers. You're going to have ML programmers as well. And like that's a skill change that's required. I mean, I'd be interested to meet indie developers who've successfully managed to apply machine learning in their production in a really sufficient way, who weren't already machine learning enthusiasts to begin with. I feel like that's... And how was that experience for them? I think that'd be really interesting to find out. Okay. Oh God, we've been doing this for 2 hours. Well, 1 hour and change. It wasn't quite 2 hours. Because, yeah, we had audio problems at the start. Right. Zumba says, I agree with Tommy. Oh, that's nice. I'm spending time this coming year talking to creative companies about ML usage in the creative industries. I think we're going to have we're going through an interesting teething phase with this. I'd be really excited to see where it goes in the coming years, because there is a lot of potential for AI, for machine learning in particular, to be used in a variety of areas, and we're seeing it all coming from very big studios. We're going to see some more of it in 2022. Keep an eye out for the GDC AI Summit this year. We got some interesting stuff. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. Swap the Moyes videos. Any thoughts on the AI in Hitman? Well, we did that. It was an Agent 45. It was episode 45, and I got lambasted for it because we never did make it episode 47. Whoops. I think you've reminded me I need to finish Hitman 3. Never get around to finishing it. Because I always do the same thing every time a new Hitman game comes out. What? You can replay the older Hitman games in Hitman, and then I go away and replay the older Hitman games. And so I haven't finished Hitman 3 because I went back and replayed Hitman 1 and 2. But yeah, I think Hitman is really interesting. It's like this sandbox of play, and I think it is so well, they put it together so well that sometimes I think it kind of masks how complicated and difficult it really is. I don't think I have any other slides here. I just have one extra slide, which is what's coming in 2022, but that's fine because we can just jump back here now because we've done all the slides. PowerPoint presentation is over, children. Well done on sticking around. There is going to be a quiz at the end. Yeah, so we did that successfully. But yeah, I think the Hitman games are really cool. I really like what they do. I often hold them in a really nice, in high regard as like this really interesting example of creating sandboxes that are not just interesting opportunities for the player to interact with systems, but also interesting ways to allow for players to create their own narratives and stories. which I really love because that's one of the cool things that Hitman does so successfully. Is every one of you, every one of you who plays the a given level in Hitman, you will have your own story about it. Like you will complete. There's different ways to kill people in Hitman, and sometimes you might go back and kill people in different ways. But the thing is, enabling the circumstances that allow for those to occur. There's so much scope for bespoke, emergent gameplay and storytelling, and I think that's one of the things that Hitman just does so well. Is you can go and do, for example, the fashion show in Paris, which I still think is probably one of the best levels they ever made, and that's in the original Hitman. Everyone has their own version of that mission, story that they will tell of that mission, of how, oh, that didn't go right, and then they fixed this, and then they got that to work, and whatever else, and then how they figured it out, and exploiting the gaps in knowledge that the AI have. Like, there's an interesting concession that Hitman does of, like, yeah, AI is kind of dumb and also really smart in that game, and it's expecting players to figure out how dumb it is to then exploit it in some way. But yes, Hitman is very, very good. I was never a big fan of the game originally, but then when they brought it back in 2016, I was like, this is just masterclass. It's so good. Fake Enema, my studio was using trained AI generated voice acting for temporary voice acting, since a lot of our internal testers don't react well to the robot voiceovers, and the AI voice acting is surprisingly good. Awesome. Dave Thomas says, in which case Hitman 3, the Berlin episode. You know, I did reach out to 343 a while ago about maybe doing a video on design of Hitman levels, but they never, well, I think I asked them again, and then they got really quiet around the time I think they announced the James Bond thing. So power to them. Maybe I can try them again. Dave Thomas, will the slides be on the internet to download later? No. And I think we're almost there. I think I'll maybe take one or two more questions. There's a question from Solid Reactor, which I'll keep to the end as he's recommending. But anything else? Oh, there might be a couple way back up that I missed. Hang on, I better scroll back. I've only drank one beer. I never even got to the second one. See. Reading through. Oh no, I answered that one. God bless Mike Cook. Yes, just God bless Mike Cook again. I think it's always important to just bless Mike Cook, because he's great. Have you experienced RimWorld? Said Mr. Happy Shop about an hour and a half ago. No, my friend has not shut up about it though. No, no. Zumba says, what tech do you think would really impress people about AI in 2022? I think, oh God. I think actually, interestingly, your research is often about trying to being able to capture motion, doing motion capture off the back of videos, and then being able to train AI off of it. I feel like that's a really interesting space of you're actually like personally, I find a lot of, we're in this space right now where a lot of deep learning innovation is very, the iterations are very small, because because right now we've got a lot of throwing things on walls to see what sticks, and I feel sometimes that that's not, if I see one more style transfer GIF, I don't care about this anymore. Like, I understand that this is technically complicated and it's quite interesting, but I don't care. I feel like, because I'm like, how am I going to use this? Why is this practical? And I think it's funny how I became more of an industry cynic. I'm developing that industry related cynicism the longer I've been doing this, where I look at academic stuff and I go, yeah, but why? And sometimes, yes, like for academic research, I think it is important that sometimes if the answer is why, and you go, well, it's challenging and we haven't figured out how to do it. It's like, yeah, but why would you use it in any real world thing? And the answer is, meh. I think that's still valuable, and so I don't want to besmirch anyone for that, because like I said, in exploring those possibility spaces, I think yields stronger returns in the long run. But yeah, I think a lot of the stuff in animation is super exciting. Like to me, and also like, and this is something I really want to start leaning into these and doing more videos on. Like, here's how they're using deep learning for animation. Here's how cheat detection. Cheat detection is the thing to me that I'm super excited about. That you can show to someone, here's how an AI detected that person was cheating, and the minutia of ways that they can figure it out. To me, that is something, because we're getting into a lot of games are so complex and cheating is so complex that trying for a human to be able to discern where these issues are and capture them is really difficult. And being able to show that an AI can interpret or master that kind of information, I think, would be really, really interesting. Zumba, I still watch that Two Robots, One Wrench demo from Valve in 2012, and I still feel it. Like, that is a great demo. It's really good. Yeah, it, I feel like I'm also a bit cynical, because anytime you look at one of these things, you go, how much of it is smoke and mirrors? But I feel like being able to yield those big returns in a way that is meaningful to players, I think is going to be really exciting. Um, Ian Barber says, wondering what your opinions on the acceleration of the big guns, constant acquisitions and buyouts. On one hand, I think it's great because it keeps developers in jobs. It allows for studios to lean into their weird and do stuff that maybe they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. You know, when you've got a studio is now being supported by, on one hand, if a studio is being supported by Tencent or, you know, Microsoft or Sony, then that means that they can do the thing that they're there to do. I think there's been a bit of a sea change in these acquisitions, particularly 10, 15 years ago. Big AAAs would have bought a studio up, and then the first thing they try to do is try and commodify that studio to fit their culture or fit their needs. And I think they finally, some of them are finally figuring out that's not what you do. That's how you kill a studio, and that's how you rip out whatever culture or, you know, identity it has by trying to homogenize it with everything else. On one hand, it's been interesting watching EA buy, um, what's that studio's name again? Respawn Entertainment. You know, they bought them up, and then they've been kind of sticking to their ground as like, this is what our identity is as a studio. But now it seems like the response is that they're just going to make every studio follow Respawn's remit, because DICE hasn't quite landed with the new Battlefield. And then it's like, sort of, oh, they got, you know, Zampella out of there and getting him to kind of take over all of them. So on one hand, I think it's great that these studios get a little bit more free reign. On the other hand, I think we run risk of then homogenizing them with everything else. Yes, the death of Visceral Games, I think, is always a really great example of how to do this wrong. And yeah, I think that's always a big concern. At the same time, you kind of want people to make big and weird games. And I think there's something that Xbox is really leaning into, Microsoft really leaning into this, because they're buying lots of studios who do different things and allowing them to go and do different things. Whereas, particularly Sony, I feel, buy a lot of studios so they will fit within the Hollywood-esque mandate that Sony has set themselves. I actually find that one of the biggest problems that Sony has is that all that Sony's games are feeling markedly similar, in that they're all that same type of type of shtick, the same type of shtick. And I think that's the problem, to the point that, you know, they're becoming awfully similar, even if they are quite different. And so yeah, and yeah, like, yep, Solid Reactor does say, yeah, like Hazelight has obviously been super independent from EA. I know there's a few other, actually, some friends of mine are currently over at, I'm trying to remember the name of their studio because I've forgotten it. I feel bad now. Sorry, Mel. Silver Rain Games, they're doing stuff with EA as an independent studio, and I think that's exciting for them. But again, it's like hope, and I think that's it. I think they've maybe learned their lesson over the years, and so I kind of hope that they're leaning into doing whatever their thing. And I think that's what Microsoft's doing really well, and I think that's what they're really leaning into with Game Pass. Is in the same year, you know. So if you look at this year, I think what was it, GameIndustry.biz labeled Microsoft as the publisher of the year, and I would agree with that because if you look at, they've been hitting things like, Flight Simulator, and they've got Halo, and they've got Forza, and they've got Age of Empires. And these are all exclusives to their platform, but it's because they're allowing those studios to go off and make their own things. And I think you're going to see even more of that from Microsoft in the next couple of years. And this is what all of those buyouts, and even that, buying Bethesda and stuff like that enables for them to do, is when you're on Game Pass, you can get all these different types of games, and they're not having to worry about competing with one another because they're all being supported by the same ecosystem. And I think that's great. Yeah, fake enema. I think acquisition can be both freeing and constraining. On one hand, you have more resources to do bigger things, but on the other hand, you're expected to stick to the franchises you were brought for. And I think that's an interesting problem, particularly for certain studios. What can, a certain studio, or even just when you're trying to reestablish your identity. I think looking at Rare is really interesting because they're a company that's owned by Microsoft, who, when bought by Microsoft, then leaned into the Kinect thing, and then you see them trying to rekindle their identity, both first through Rare Replay and then through Sea of Thieves. And now they're working on their next game as well, which I forget the name of it off the top of my head. I should quickly. Everwild, that's it. That they're working on. And I feel like that's interesting to watch that studio rebirth itself, because I feel like Sea of Thieves is it's a huge change for them. It's not a game that they would typically make, but it is so laced with Rare's unique energy and character. And then looking at Everwild and going, that does not look like something that Rare would make. And that's quite cool to see. And even things like Playground are historically a racing studio. They make Forza. They make Forza Horizon. Well, they make other stuff, but they make Forza Horizon. Now they're making Fable from a studio that used to be owned by Microsoft that then got collapsed. What does it mean for a studio like that to go and try and make a game like Fable? And can they then diversify themselves and continue to grow? I always find it really cool looking at studios like Sumo Digital, who are based here in the UK, because they're quite often a studio that works with other studios, and they work with so many different publishers and support so many different games. They're really interesting to look at in how they continue to survive as an individual entity by supporting and engaging with all these other companies and the productions they're making. I think that's really cool. Yeah. And then I think actually Orlovsky does kind of speak to the issue of having people. A small team should have someone in suit who understand business and can speak to potential investors and get actual funding, but then you also need someone who's got a lot of funding to actually understand how games are made. And the Xbox issue, and I think the Amazon thing is a really good example of that. Like, their New World is like the first thing they've actually made that didn't blow up in their face. And Google stopped doing first party development for Stadia. Almost forgot the name of it because it's dead already. And that's what told you that platform's dead. They're not making their own games for it anymore. So why would you buy it? And that is the opposite end of it. I think that's why EA of all people seem to be doing the right thing. Why Microsoft are doing the right thing, because they've learned those lessons, and hopefully they're not going to repeat them. I'm a little skeptical because I'm a perpetual cynic, but you look at Google and you look at Amazon and you go, oh yeah, that's the Lionhead issue from years ago, or that's just too many people with too much money and not enough sense coming together and probably not being able to, bring it all together in a way that's cogent. Dave Thomas Guerrilla Games mentioned that in one of their videos they had to ask for permission. Yeah, maybe support from Sony before they were able to produce Horizon Zero Dawn rather than another Killzone. Well, if you think about it, for a long time, Killzone was I wouldn't have said it was their big one, but it was a first-person shooter franchise that Sony could rely on. New console, new Killzone. And then we don't want to do that. We want to do something else. And I've heard stories as well about how getting Sea of Thieves up and running at Rare was a bit of an effort. Actually, Rare Replay was a bit of an effort because they were trying to. It was that battle for the studio's identity and trying to rekindle that at a time when they were known as the Connect Sports people. And I think that was in, and I think Microsoft learned their lesson with it. It took them a little while, but they learned their lesson. Okay, we're approaching 2.5 hours. I'm going to have to stop because I am about to melt under these lights. But yeah, thank you all. And one last thing, there's a question that came up a couple of minutes ago that I need to go back and answer because I was told to wait until the end. Where is it? Do-dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo. Yeah, Solid Reactor asked, important question, save it for last. How can I, as an AI in Games viewer, support this channel? How does the Patreon work? Give me the elevator pitch and convince me. There's multiple ways you can support what I do. First and foremost, if you just like my work, share it, please. Stick it out on Twitter. Stick it out on whatever social media platform you like. This video was great. This video was cool. I learned something from this. Maybe this video wasn't perfect, but I have some constructive criticism that I will leave for him in the comments. Please share my videos, get them out there, get them in the eyeballs of other people, because that's what helps. Reddit is always is a mystery to me. I still can't figure out how to get any videos to really slap on Reddit. Also, I'm banned from several subreddits because I hate Reddit, and then I get told off because the only time I ever jump into Reddit is I post my own videos. Self-promotion's a no-no on Reddit, which is funny because it's full of narcissists. So share my work if you can. I always think that's really great. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like, that's also really helpful. Then when it actually gets to supporting in some way, in a monetary sense, two things. First of all, if you want to just, there's things like the YouTube member system. You can sign up as a YouTube member, and you can, if you're somebody who likes to use YouTube Premium, if you're going to be somewhere on YouTube and you like putting money into YouTube, do it that way. That's totally fine. What tends to happen is I also tend to put videos out earlier as community posts on YouTube for YouTube members. There's not that many of you. If you maybe have only got a couple of quid and you don't want to go and debt yourself to me on a permanent basis, doing super chats like Dave Thomas and Maz Jada have done tonight is always awesome. But also, I think the super thanks is finally coming to a lot of creators, which is essentially a tip jar where you can just stick a couple of bucks down on a video, and it's going to be essentially like the super chats you see here, but they're going to be on actual videos. And so you can actually leave a comment on a video and actually attach a couple of bucks to it. Zumba Pup says, surely you're forgetting TikTok. If you're on TikTok and you can find a way to make my videos pop on TikTok, you let me know. TikTok is about 20 years too far behind for me. I'm too old for TikTok. I'm actually super impressed by people who can actually engage in game dev stuff on TikTok. It's really, really difficult. My respect to them massively. Patreon is a slightly different space. Patreon is all about, you have the privilege to support the show, and we actually have a lot more behind the scenes that goes on as a result. So different tiers give different things. If you're even supporting for a couple of bucks a month, you get the newsletter every month. Every month is sort of like this, but it's a written newsletter. I tell you all about what's going on behind the scenes, what I'm up to, what I can tell you about. We have a look at how well the Patreon's doing, how well the YouTube is doing. I talk about the recent episodes and what's really worked and what hasn't worked. I'll tell you about upcoming episodes. The next tier up, what you can do. The main tier, I think it's about £5 a month, the ghost tier as we call it, gets your name in the credits of every episode. Means you get to watch the episodes in advance, anywhere from 24 hours up to maybe potentially a week, depending on what my production schedule's looking like. You can get to vote on episodes before they come out. You also get a early access for 3 months to new episodes of Smoke and Mirrors. You're also going to get early access to the brand new series that's coming to patrons next year called Most Wanted, which is my series of videos where I tell you all about my white whales, the episodes of AI in games I would love to make, and I haven't been able to do them yet, and I've already recorded the first 2 of these. Patrons expect to see the first one of these hitting the feed in January. On top of all that, we also have the Discord. So the Discord server is public for everyone to access, but there is a separate area that is dedicated to patrons that's available on the back end. We have the Q&A segment where I can actually maybe do videos based on questions that are submitted. I haven't been doing as many of them because I haven't had as many questions. But also, we actually have more regular video development updates. I will post screenshots. I will post updates on videos as I'm making them. Sometimes I'm far more active on the Discord than otherwise. We have a dedicated area of the Discord server just for the patrons to hang out in. And also that's where things like Smoke and Mirrors episodes get published early for people to check out. So you get a lot more there. Also, and I haven't updated this in a little while, patrons who are on Ghost tier or higher get access to all my notes. So all the notes that I make and all the resources that I used or like sources I used to make an episode, when I am within my rights to be able to share it publicly, I make it available for you to check out and download. So if you want to go away and look at the script or look at the notes or the research papers that I accumulated to make that video, you can do that. And then on top of that, I think the last one is I think the top tier, which is the Doomslayer. You get merch with that. You get there's like a mug, you get laptop stickers, you get one of these t-shirts, which is a custom t-shirt, which you can only get that way. I am looking in 2022 to be doing a new run of merch, new t-shirts and everything else. I got some plans for that in the coming years. But yes, you can support AI in Games on Patreon on a monthly basis. You can also do it on an annual basis on different tiers, and you get up to a 16% discount if you're doing it on an annual basis. So there you go. Yes, Zumba Pub. We're gonna have essentially a tip jar on YouTube in next year. It's only available to a handful of creators at the moment. It's going to be rolled out to everyone else shortly. But yes, Solid Reactor is now officially a Ghost level supporter. Your elevator pitch was a success. Thank you very much. Awesome Sauce. Oh god, did I just say Awesome Sauce? Live. But yes, that is the easiest way to support the work. You get a better insight into what is going on a month-to-month basis via the Patreon, because I like to hang out and chat with people. And also, if you can, hang out and talk about games in the Discord server with me. Sometimes the Discord server gets super busy, sometimes it gets super quiet. And it doesn't help sometimes that I'm super quiet when I'm overwhelmed by everything else. So being able to chat with everyone is always great. It's nice to hang out with people in that space. So, yep. Oh, as a reminder, patreon.com/AI_and_games. I'm going to write it down in there for you to go and check out. And if you don't want to do that, if you just want to go, hey, I just want to watch your videos and share them around, you do that. That'd be awesome as well. Cool, and a whole bunch of people just turned up right at the end. What was it? Somebody's talking about demonetized when they stop paying small creators. Like, yeah, like also like certain channels aren't monetized until like the monetization. Look at that! It appeared right at the top. Happy Pie just pledged for the year. That's amazing. One of the things that is interesting is that now, because my channel's been around for a while, it does get monetized. A key thing to point out, I make more money on Patreon on a monthly basis than I make from YouTube monetization, because YouTube monetization is based on views. So sometimes it'll do very, very well, and then other times it will not. So yeah. Oh, funnily enough, as we were just talking about Patreon floating around, Happy Pie, thank you very much, has just supported on an annual pledge, but also I lost 2 monthly pledges since the last time I looked at it 2 days ago. So there you go. That's what it is. So if you can support, that'd be amazing. If you can't support, don't worry about it. Share my work, spread the love. That's what it's all about. But yeah, YouTube monetization is often really fickle. So Smoke and Mirrors, my second channel where I post the Smoke and Mirrors videos, isn't monetized because it needs up to a certain number of views in order to get there. I think it needs to have got over 40,000 watch minutes. So you know what? Sit and watch all my episodes of Smoke and Mirrors on loop. No, don't do that. That's going to get me in trouble with YouTube. But maybe encourage all your friends to do it. That would help. And so, yeah, that's always an interesting problem. And they're making those rules change all the time. Incredibly fickle. But yeah, let's quickly wrap. I want to talk about what is coming in the next year. So first of all, episodes. So let me see. Excuse me. Oh. So we finished the year on AI in Games episode 63. 64 through 70 are already spec'd. I know what they are. I need to make them. 64 is a surprise, which I have kept from everyone, even the patrons. So sometimes, sorry, even the patrons don't find out. 65 is a patron voted topic. 66 is a secret. 67 is going to be not a patron voted topic, but you know what it's going to be, because in the last newsletter I talked about an interview that we've got coming up in January, which is very exciting. 68 is also a patron topic. 69 is a weird quirky project that I'm hoping that I can get done and then release as a video. 70 is going to be a very big AAA title. When we get all those done, who knows? Looking at Design Dive, Revisiting Evil Part 2 is being written. It is well underway. I'm looking forward to getting Revisiting Evil Part 2 out to you. That's going to be looking at Resident Evil 4 through 6. What else have we got? AI 101. I haven't forgotten it. The next episode is on Bark systems and actually looking at Bark and dialogue and even looking at things like quirky Valve projects and how does the narrative work in games like Hades. So that's coming up. Really looking forward to that. I have two new video game. No, I have two new video series I am working on right now. One of them is a very different change of pace, where it requires me to go away and do a bunch of research and reading, but I think it's going to be a fun one. I'm working on that. Maybe for the second half of next year, you're going to see the first episode, because I want to go away and actually research the first couple. Meanwhile, there's also another new project which is coming up, which is we're going to be spending a little bit more time dealing with the people behind the games that you like. This is requiring a lot of external support to put this together. I'm not ready to talk about it yet. The wheels are in motion, but I am very excited for this. I've actually got a production meeting with other people, external people, in January, hopefully to continue pushing this forward. But it is, in terms of collaborating with people outside of myself and here on YouTube, one of the weirdest, most ambitious problems I've attempted. We're going to be seeing a little bit of stuff from Model AI because I am entrenched within the company, and we are going to have an actual sit down and look at some of the stuff that they are doing. Ubisoft have not forgotten me. We're hoping that we can maybe actually do a collaboration again with some of their developers, because I really want to continue to highlight some of the cool stuff that's happening there. Maybe not the NFTs though. What else is happening? Oh yes, there's one other super, super massive project that I'm working on that I've been chipping away at for a little while. I'm not going to say what it is publicly. Alan Zaccone knows what it is, because I told him a little while ago. But it's something very different from what I've done. But I think it's something that if I did it, people would dig it. But that's a very different thing, and I need the time and space to do that. And my circumstances are going to be a little hectic for the next 6 months, after which things are going to change. So lots of stuff on the horizon. This is why I said, even though I'm exhausted, I'm quite galvanized at the moment, because I have a plan. I have been working towards a goal for the last pandemic. I have a little plan that I've got in motion, and we're slowly getting there. And maybe this time next year, the plan will actually have been properly executed. Also, by this time next year, I think at least one, maybe two games that I'm involved in will have shipped. And hopefully we're going to do some videos on those as well. And certainly the studios have been enthusiastic about it. And one of those is a game I actually worked on a couple of years ago, and I haven't worked on it since. I actually worked as an AI programmer on this game for a year to help get the team started, and then they went off and took it themselves. So lots of stuff to come. Just trying to find the time and space to do it. Of course, you will hear all about it, and some of these will really actually, I'll need your support to promote and encourage people to engage in this project if it comes about. Alan has appeared in the chat once again because he's excited because he knows what this is about. And yeah, so hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about at this end of year review next year. First of all, big thanks. Also, I just noticed Dave Thomas has also supported the Patreon while I've been chatting and giving this spiel. That's amazing. You are a fantastic human being, sir. Also, he pledged once, but it's appeared twice. Yes, we have 2 patrons. Isn't that awesome? Hooray! Actually, and another person, actually, shout out to Ice Bamboo 97 who joined yesterday, because they're all so great. But yeah, a lot of stuff to come. I am very tired, but I'm not done with this by any stretch. And as I said, there is a plan that I have been slowly working on. In fact, the plan was slightly derailed by COVID, but it is back on track, and I think we're going to be... Oh, and Zumba Pup is starting an AI tech company this summer. Cool stuff is happening in 2022. You heard it here first. And maybe, just maybe, we might get on top of this pandemic while we're at it. Well, maybe not in the UK. We're not very good at listening to experts. On that note, I hope you all have a very good, very safe, very healthy Christmas or winter break or whatever it is that you do, depending on your faith and adoption of consumerist habits. I hope you're all continuing to stay safe and be well. Hope you all have a great new year, and I will be back next year, episode 64. It's going to be a weird one. I'm quite excited. Revisiting Evil Part 2 is going to come back in, and it's gonna be there. Solid Reactor, perhaps have a section in each video at the end you make where you celebrate new Patreon joiners. I used to have a shout out thing. I might just do a movies with Mikey where I just shout out the names at the end, just like, yeah, these people are awesome. I feel like I should do more of that. Maybe that's a good idea. That is a good idea. I think I like that. But yes, I hope you're all having a safe and pleasant evening. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out on this stream. I wish you all the best, and we'll be back soon. Very soon, in fact. All right. 2022 is going to be the year where I release another video. All right. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Be well. I'll be back.